Hello and welcome to another episode of the EA show, now called Exploring Arguments. I hope you guys are doing good. For all my Muslim brothers and sisters out there, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And for everybody else, hello, what's going on? Tonight I have a Muslim brother of mine that helped with my conversion, Moel. What's going on, Mo?
How you doing, Justin?
I'm doing fantastic. Was able to break my fast a little bit ago. Today was a hard day. Today I was standing in there, cleaning up the kitchen. I kept opening the fridge, looking in it, and it was
getting easy, right? It's getting easy now with the fasting. Like, you getting used to it or not yet?
Yeah. I'm getting real used to it. Myself, Jake, the Muslim metaphysician, and Hatem. We're all in a group together to where we're actually competing with each other to see how much weight we can lose during the month of Ramadan.
Yeah,
I believe that I'm on top right now, and I'm gonna keep pushing. I'm gonna keep going.
All right, sounds good, man.
But yeah, how's fasting going for you?
Alhamdulillah, it's okay. No complaints. No stress. I'm taking it easy. Just eating. Not filling up, not trying to get a full stomach or anything, just eating to a healthy state, just to be in a healthy state, and that's all, and it's easy. It's so far so good, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So let me go ahead and say hi. I want to say hi to everybody that's in the chat. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. If you're new here, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button for more content. We're going to be bringing a panel of Muslim brothers on to where we'll have a specific topic that we'll talk about for a little bit, and then we'll open up the lines. I think if we have some time tonight, we're going to go ahead and open up the lines to some people to join in and talk to us, whether it's an atheist that has a contention with something that we said during the show, or try and fix something that happened in the video, or and anybody that like to come on and put their 2 cents in. We'll be opening up. I'll put a StreamYard link later in the chat. But I do want to point out that within the EA show we have monetized, so we're now accepting paid members. And for the paid members, one of the things is that I go ahead and shout out everybody's name either at the beginning or the end of the show. So right now we have Skids the Clown, which is one of my good atheist friends. We have Sonny Shell, another good atheist friend of mine. Blazing Wizard Pope. I'm not sure how much longer he's going to be a paid member because he's not too happy with my conversion. But that being the fact, we also have Isa Al-Kabi. We have Saifu Shamasidin Jr. And Mo Ali. So thank you guys so much for contributing. That helps keep the lights on. That helps upgrade content, upgrade people that we have on the show. Some people do require payment to be able to give their time to come on the show. So that's kind of what that stuff goes to, and I appreciate everybody that helps out. But to get to the point of the show tonight is Mo and myself are going to be reviewing a conversation that happened with a Christian and an atheist. You may know this atheist by the name of T-Jump, and the Christian's name is Randall Rouser. I've been watching more and more of his content, and even though he is a Christian, when it comes to philosophy and epistemology, the guy is solid. So we're going to be going over that. I'm going to be playing it at a quicker speed. The video is typically about 1 hour and 5 minutes long, so if we play it at a quicker speed, we may be able to cut some time off of that and still have some time to get some callers in. So, Mo, if you're ready, we'll go ahead and get this thing started.
Okay, let's go ahead. Yes.
All right.
All right, it looks like we're on. So, Randall, thanks for coming on for a second conversation. I really appreciate it. Last time we talked a lot about the general arguments for the existence of God, and today I wanted to present to you my general epistemology that I'm working on to write it into a book. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on my model, because essentially, my model essentially takes the position that it's not even potentially possible to have evidence or arguments that could indicate a God. And I'd like to present to you why that is the case and to hear your thoughts on it. So, first question, did you get a chance to look up the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's definition of naturalistic pantheism since the last time we talked?
No, I haven't.
All right, so just I wrote it down, luckily. So in the section on pantheism, in section number 6, the nature of the cosmos, the first one is parentheses 1, physicalism. Many pantheists argue that the physical conceptions are adequate to explain the entire cosmos, often termed scientific or naturalistic pantheism. Such worldviews make no ontological commitments beyond those sanctioned by empirical science. And the section 12, personal, Einstein was a pantheist but rejected any notion of a personal God, and like Einstein, for many pantheists, rejection of a personal deity is the definitive mark or most important element of their position. So naturalistic pantheism is essentially just naturalism, but it's kind of like a natural God kind of thing, but without the personal part.
Do you have something to add to that, Mo? I think we talked backstage a little bit.
Yeah, I just wanted to. Yeah, basically what he said is pantheism is a physicalistic God, according to his definition. So he doesn't believe in a conscious being that is immaterial.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean that's pretty clear and concise. Sometimes I do think people use this this term naturalistic pantheism for example, a good friend of mine, Scott Williamson. He's typically an atheist. He's technically considers himself an atheist, but he uses the term naturalistic pantheist to maybe get into conversations with some theists that might already have a bad taste in their mouth with just the word atheist. So some people use it for different reasons and whatnot, and I think he's using this term for naturalistic pantheism to kind of get on more of a common ground with Randall within the conversation.
Okay.
The consciousness part.
So when you say natural, how do you define natural?
I have no real way to define the distinction between natural and supernatural. It's kind of an arbitrary distinction. I have no way to parse that at all.
So when you say everything is natural, what are you even saying then?
I don't know. It's not really a specific thing. It's just trying to make a distinction, a broad distinction between the ideas of a natural scientific worldview and a theistic kind of a worldview. So it's more just a general distinction to try and distinguish those two more than anything.
So if we're distinguishing them, we should be able to say in virtue of what is something natural versus non-natural. So what would that distinction be?
Well, my general idea would be essentially if there's a kind of a consciousness that isn't based in any physical thing, then I would classify that as kind of a supernatural thing. But that's just arbitrary definition I'm slapping on it.
Okay, so the distinction, let's say for something to be natural, would be for ultimately in its most basic metaphysical composition to be non-conscious.
Or just matter and energy and motion or something like that.
Okay, because the matter and energy and motion, the challenge there is we're already assuming a particular understanding of those concepts, which could very well be rendered redundant in future scientific investigation. And if science told us, well, the world is composed of something other than that which we currently understand to be matter and energy, would we have thereby falsified naturalism?
Right. So there could also be more fundamental things, but as long as they're not like a supernatural consciousness, I'd still classify it as natural.
So you just said you're not clear as what supernatural is.
Oh, right. As long as it's not like a consciousness that isn't purely material functioning, then yeah.
Okay.
So just to point that out, that was Randall seeing that that Tom was going towards a actual definition of what he describes as natural, even though earlier he openly admitted that he just slaps an arbitrary definition on the word natural. So how could you actually come up with what you just said when earlier you said you don't have an actual explanation for what natural actually means?
Yeah. So it's pretty much not sure of his own worldview or epistemology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when making these, having these conversations, especially with somebody of Randall Rouser's stature, that something as simple as the definition of knowledge or the definition of naturalism or the word natural, you should have a solid definition for it because it is fundamental to the argument you're making for your own epistemology.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so to begin, I affirm something kind of like Kant's noumenal phenomenal distinction, where the phenomenal world is the thing we experience and interact with, and the noumenal is reality in itself. And the phenomenal and noumenal could be the exact same thing, or they could be completely different. For example, we could be in the Matrix, and the things we experience have no correlation to reality, but we have no way to know one way or the other because everything we experience is the phenomenal, and we have no way to go outside of our experiences to access reality itself. So if someone is making claims about the noumenal world, they would need some kind of noumenal evidence, because no matter how much phenomenal evidence they provide, that could just be a product of the Matrix, and so it doesn't support claims about the noumenal world. And so noumenal claims would require noumenal evidence. And what's unique about my model is that I expand on the idea of the noumenal and what constitutes a noumenal claim. For example, I take the position, the metaphysical naturalism, which states that there is only the natural and there is no supernatural. Even if given all of the evidence of the natural world, that does not show that there is no supernatural, because there could always be more supernatural out there that we just haven't discovered yet. And so if you consider the question, well, what kind of evidence could be discovered to justify the claim the natural world is all there is? Well, there really isn't any that could justify that kind of a claim, because anything that it would take to justify it would have to go infinitely far into the unknown to say that of all of this, we could never discover this other kind of a thing. And we just don't have that kind of justification with any of the access or any of the kinds of knowledge that we have. So nothing can really justify the claim there is only the natural world. And because of that, that claim, metaphysical naturalism, is a claim about the noumenal. And so none of the phenomenal evidence we have could justify the noumenal claim about metaphysical naturalism. And the reason is that the reason metaphysical naturalism is a noumenal claim is because it makes a stopping point for truth. Meaning,
which minute are we on? Okay, so 5 minutes and 23 seconds. Yeah. Could you show the minutes so I can be able to spot him at which minute he's on? Could you
Yeah. What I'll do is I'll just leave my mouse right here. Have we already passed one up that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I can still talk about it. I mean, he talks about Immanuel Kant's the phenomenal and the noumenal. Okay, and it seems that within the whole discussion, by the way, because that's why I was confused when I was listening to T-Jump, it seems like he's not using the right definition for the nominal. So the nominal cannot be assessed based on our metaphysics or minds. Therefore, might as well just leave it alone. But he keeps using it in this discussion. So he misuses the term nominal, and he doesn't know what it means and doesn't know how to apply it as well, because there's no point of applying it in this discussion. We might as well just leave it alone. You know what I'm saying? The nominal. Yeah. There's no point of, and he thinks it has to do with metaphysics. No, metaphysics is a branch of philosophy, so it has nothing to do with what Immanuel Kant was referring to when it comes to the nominal. All we can assess is the phenomenal with our minds, our metaphysics.
Yeah. So, and I think here in a second, when Randall comes in to speak about this, he tries to correct it without straight up calling him out on it. But he comes in to correct it by saying, okay, so can we use more colloquial terms like the universe as we see it for phenomenal, and then nominal is the universe as it is. And I think that's much more understanding of a way to put to make those terms.
Yeah, and honestly, Randall Rouser, he was a gentleman. He didn't want to correct him too much. He just wanted to kind of go easy on him, from what I've observed at least. Because but I think it would have been a better approach to just tell him, hey, this is the academic definition, and let's use that, let's apply that, instead of letting him ramble on, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Make a lot of mistakes later on. So, but yeah, go ahead.
It makes a claim that extends infinitely far into the unknown and says there can't possibly be anything in this unknown that will overturn this statement of there is only the natural, and we clearly can't do that. So, but this kind of a claim also applies to properties of a God, like saying God is by definition not created, or to rephrase it, there is only one God and there is no super God. That claim fails for the exact same reason metaphysical naturalism fails, which is that even if we had as much evidence for a God as we do for the natural world, that would not show that that God was not created by another greater God for the exact same reason. There could always be another greater God out there we just haven't discovered yet. And this would apply to all metaphysical properties.
Emphasize on something, because he mentioned that hypothetically he states that even if given all evidence in the natural world, this does not show that there is evidence of supernatural. But based on what are we assessing this now? Are we assessing it based on a physicalist approach? And that's where epistemology comes in, and our presuppositions or axioms come into play. Is it based on this type of physicalistic approach, pantheism, his worldview, or is it based on an approach where we can actually even delve deeper and try to justify our cognition and rationality? Like he mentions Immanuel Kant, and Immanuel Kant, in a nutshell, will say, even though he talked about the noumenal and the phenomenal, in a nutshell, Immanuel Kant will say that our experiences and I can quote Immanuel Kant if you don't mind.
Sure.
So he says in his, I got this from a lecture, so it's from his book, Critique of Pure Reason. Our experience of the sublime, that moment when imagination turns over to reason, that moment reveals to us that finally cognition and reason is supreme over sensation and imagination, and that therefore we are super sensible creatures. In that moment, we learn with great joy that there is a faculty within us that is greater than nature, that can surpass both her majesty, quantitative sublime, and her might, qualitative sublime. And if that is true, that discovery is true, that there is something within us that is greater than nature. That means that our final destination and end is greater than that of nature. So this is basically indicates that our metaphysics are of the sublime. You get what I'm saying? So as soon as he's trying to muddy the water with the noumenal and the phenomenal, especially the noumenal, he emphasizes too much on it. But the fact that we have this consciousness and cognition, we cannot account for it under physicalism, naturalism, is something I would call mystical, something of the sublime, like Immanuel Kant will say. And that's pretty. So if he wants to say, what do you call it? Like if we discover all of that is in nature, but you still have the problem of induction. The science, you know what I'm saying? So now we have to use something be above science, which is philosophy. You know what I mean?
And that's a good point that I want to add this in, is that this review tonight is not us just stomping all over Tom Jump. It has nothing to do with that. Tom Jump, he's a smart guy. He really is. He's a smart guy. When I was an atheist, I followed a lot of what he said and whatnot. And now that I've converted, a lot of atheists have come and say, hey, I want to know what you believe. You know, what were the arguments that convinced you? And I said, hey, you want to sit down and have a conversation about it? I'd love to. And not to stomp on Ethan or anything, but the other night on Ethan's show was a perfect example. If you watch Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist, when we got into the philosophical discussions, it happens a lot to where I say, before we can get into the arguments, we're going to have to assess your epistemology, see if your standards of evidence on investigating claims is consistent with itself. Because a lot of times an atheist will say, you know, come more of an empiricist route and say that to have good reason to believe in something, we need empirical evidence. Well, then you bring up solipsism, which Randall will do that later with Tom. And it throws their game completely off, because then they are having a belief in something that has nothing to do with empirical evidence. You cannot prove that solipsism is true. If you can, I will personally come pick you up at your house and take you down to get your Nobel Prize, because you will get a Nobel Prize for solving the hard problem of solipsism. So that's why we're reviewing this tonight, is because I've gotten pretty much every single atheist that's wanted to come and say, hey, I'm open-minded to hearing what arguments convinced you, because I want to know the truth too. And then when you get into the arguments, they have a inconsistent standards of evidence for investigating the claims. For, you know, we start at the Kalam and we never make it past. We never make it past the Kalam. The only reason the other night we went past the Kalam is because Ethan said, hey, I don't know this much about it. Let's just grant that you're right for this argument so we can move to the next one.
Yes.
When they don't do that, we're stuck at the Kalam because they require empirical evidence for the first premise.
Yeah, and causation is a presupposition in the philosophy of science. And this is
exactly and a lot of people don't notice that science itself is a subclass of philosophy.
Yes.
To even do an investigation, you need your hypothesis or your idea is a philosophical statement that you make. Then you try and gather physical evidence to back up that philosophical argument.
Yes. And speaking of Immanuel Kant again, Immanuel Kant will tell you that your metaphysics are above your science, because you need your metaphysics. You cannot refute logic with logic. At the end of the day, what are you going to do? You need your metaphysics. So it seems like T Jump, he shoots himself in the foot a few times, you know, and contradicts himself. But let's continue. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. God being all-powerful and all-knowing and all-loving and eternal and necessary, divine aseity, pure actuality, perfect simplicity, etc. There could always be another God out there that's more powerful or more knowledgeable or more simple or more good. And so all of these omni-necessary properties are essentially just words for a noumenal something. And because they're noumenal, no amount of phenomenal evidence that we have could ever justify belief in those kinds of noumenal properties, for the same reason we can't justify belief in metaphysical naturalism. So essentially, the main argument goes something like all forms of human knowledge are phenomenal, God is noumenal, no amount of human knowledge can indicate the existence of a God. And of course, this doesn't just apply to a God, it applies to all noumenal claims like metaphysical naturalism or any kind of metaphysical claim about the fundamental nature of reality. So essentially, I'm not arguing that there isn't a God, I'm arguing that we should dismiss all noumenal claims about the fundamental nature of reality, top-down worldviews, and build our understanding of reality, making claims from the phenomenal or the bottom-up worldviews. And that's essentially the main conclusion of my epistemology. But it goes a bit further because I say we can demonstrate this is the case, that for any given argument or evidence for the existence of God, we can demonstrate they don't work.
To emphasize one thing, I think he's still confusing the noumenal with metaphysics, and that's his problem. He's not philosophically trained, like no disrespect to him, he's a nice guy, but he's not philosophically trained in the sense that he knows his definitions. And the best thing to do before you discuss with anyone like Voltaire, if I'm not mistaken, it was Voltaire who said this, bring your definitions and I'll bring mine, and so we can be on the same page. But I don't think he knows his definitions well. Yeah.
For example, if we have a box and you said that there was a rabbit in the box, but your evidence for this is that the box weighs 2 pounds. The fact the box weighs 2 pounds is not evidence of a rabbit because it can be equally explained by a lizard or a coffee mug or weights or Legos, etc. So the fact that the evidence works equally for numerous other options means it is not evidence of a rabbit. The same applies to evidence of God. If I can show the same evidence or arguments individually and collectively indicate a non-God equally as well as they do for a God, like pantheism or naturalistic pantheism as I define it, then they're not actually evidence of a God.
Okay, I want to add something. I got to add because this is he's now equivocating, and that's the problem with many lay atheists when it comes to philosophy. Because a lot of lay atheists, from our experience at least, not to disparage nobody, but they conflate disciplines. So you have science, which is a discipline which is a discipline or a paradigm that is not in philosophy. Okay. I'm not trying to contradict what you said in the beginning. I'm just trying to say that science is a discipline in of itself, and philosophy is a discipline that deals with like metaphysics and whatnot. So when he does the box analogy containing a rabbit and saying, okay, it could not be a rabbit, it could be a cat or something that has the same amount of weight. This is based on empirical data, while we applied our metaphysics nonetheless. But it's based on empirical data. God is beyond the empirical. So when he brings in science to try to discuss a theophilosophical discussion, he's making a fallacy of equivocation.
Yeah. I just want to make sure in the chat, Amy is really nice. I've met Amy before. And I want to make sure that we don't bombard her, any of the brothers in the chat. Let's not dogpile anybody. Let's keep things professional, keep things respectable in the chat. I'm not saying that anything's happened yet, but one of the brothers says you're getting bombarded and he's going to back off to let others handle it. I just saw that and I wanted to make sure that we keep respectful in the chat to no matter what your belief or epistemology is or anything like that. Let's just all respect each other because that's just the name of the game when it comes to the EA show.
The box analogy is an example of a good argument that's simply underdetermined, but it's also possible that the argument is simply false. For example, if you have a compass that you think points north, and every time you shake it, it points in a different random direction, it's a broken compass. It doesn't indicate any direction because it indicates every direction, which is an example of just false evidence, or the principle of explosion. From false to anything follows. Any argument that can work for both theism or naturalist pantheism could be underdetermined, or it could be false, but either way, it works for both and isn't evidence of a God, so I'm not really going to focus on that too much about the arguments. The box analogy, like the evidence of the natural world, is evidence that all of the evidence of the natural world isn't evidence there is no supernatural. Equally, like all the evidence of if there was a God wouldn't be evidence there is not a greater God. All of these are examples of the problem of induction. The problem of induction and underdetermination, which are only two of the examples of dozens of equivalently big problems in every field of human knowledge, which essentially act as a barricade between the phenomenal and the noumenal. And so all of these problems that exist in every field of human knowledge essentially have the same effect and show that no form of human knowledge can go from the phenomenal to the noumenal. They're all of the phenomenal realm. For example, in epistemology, you have problems like the problem of the criterion, Agrippa's trilemma, the problem of the universals, the problem of easy knowledge. In math, you have Gödel's incompleteness theorem. In logic, Tarski's undefinability theorem. Moral knowledge.
Let's stop him here if you don't mind. Okay, so at this point, he's really talking nonsense. We got to say it how it is, So he's classifying God under induction, when the notion is based on our metaphysical knowledge, like axioms and epistemology and whatnot.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole discussion is based on epistemology. So he's using logic. He's trying to refute logic using some logical claims or some type of metaphysics that doesn't make any sense. He's being bombastic in a way, you know, and presupposing empiricism and the scientific method again, you know, trying to apply that scientific lens on a philosophical or a metaphysical claim. The claim that God is the greatest, it means that he is supreme above all that exists, even the noumenal. Okay, if you want to put the noumenal in the mix, so God will be even above that, because just because we can, when we look at a cup, for example, we perceive it the way our mind interprets the cup. That's the phenomenal. The noumenal now, it could be something that is beyond our own cognitive and consciousness.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, وَلَنْ يَكُونَ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ.
Exactly.
I mean, right. That is the whole point, that God is unlike anything in existence, whether that's the way that he's defining noumenal or phenomenal.
Exactly. Exactly. So now, even if you want to put the noumenal in the mix, we would say God is the greatest thing that exists ontologically. Okay. So as soon as he says, okay, we don't have evidence for this, or we can't find this based on empiricism, physicalism, naturalism, whatever, and even the noumenal, the metaphysical, we're using our metaphysics to say this. God has to be by necessity and by intuition as well, and reason and logic has to be omniscient and omnipotent. These are innate. You don't have to. Someone doesn't have to come and bring you evidence that he's like that, because as soon as you go from the kalam or the contingency or consciousness and all these arguments, this would be like the conclusion of these arguments, that God has to be omniscient and omnipotent. You know. And so I just want to ask, if he was to say there could be something beyond that we don't know anything about, like the noumenal as his analogy, then what other diction or definition would he like to use to classify it as, if not supreme? That's the question. If not supreme, what else is he going to use?
Yeah, absolutely. In the chat, Brother Ahmed wanted to ask what your educational background is. He says you're very well read.
I'm not. I'm just a layman like everyone else. I just know a little bit. That's a little bit of knowledge. But thanks.
All right, ready to continue?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Yep, there you go, Isa. That is exactly what. 112 verse 4. I think that's the last verse in 112. All right, let's get back to it.
Supernatural and natural sources. These same problems which prevent scientific and secular philosophy from making conclusions about the noumenal realm, like metaphysical naturalism, also prevent religious claims from being able to make conclusions about the noumenal realm, about God. And because of these problems in secular philosophy, the questions that secular philosophy and science can't answer, theology can't answer either, but both can make up answers about what the noumenal could be like. For example, anything that supernatural can explain, the unknown natural can also explain. For example, objective morality could be explained by God, but it could also be explained by an undiscovered law of nature that an atheist could just arbitrarily make up. So every known form of knowledge has these problems. They all apply to every worldview or every form of knowledge.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize on that point, where he says it's grounded in nature and any atheist can make up. Therefore, it's subjective, is not objective. And even if he wants to apply this empirical, scientific type of notion, if he knows the philosophy of science, science is amoral. It cannot distinguish between a true morality and a false morality, to the point that you might have like moral nihilism to that point. You know what I'm saying? So just to emphasize on that his notion of objective morality is rubbish.
Yeah. I totally forgot what I was about to say.
Grounded on naturalism, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Any asserted evidence or arguments used to indicate a stopping point for truth will necessarily run into one of these problems, and whatever approach you take to try and address the problem will be able to be mirrored by the non-God alternatives, showing that the approach is not, in fact, evidence of a God. Therefore, if your explanation has any stopping points for truth, such as eternal, all-powerful, all-knowing, omnibenevolent, the only divine, perfectly simple, or a brute fact, or any of those things, then those can't be supported by any known form of human knowledge, and they're essentially just bald assertions, which can be demonstrated because the same bald assertions can be made about a naturalistic alternative like naturalistic pantheism. For example, many theists respond that when asked who created God, well, they say God could not have been created because he was by definition uncreated. And so this noumenal property of uncreated can be applied to the undiscovered natural thing and attributed to naturalist pantheism. So I can just say naturalist pantheism is by definition uncreated. So anytime you add these metaphysical properties, they're essentially de facto infinites. And so when you add them to an explanation, it allows you to do an infinite amount of ad hoc reasoning and gives them an infinite amount of explanatory power, or it makes it appear that they have an infinite amount of explanatory power when they really have none, because the same methods work for everything. A bridge of infinite length can cross any chasm. And this, again, can be demonstrated by just giving these, asserting these properties about the alternatives to theism, which can show that they're not actually evidence of theism.
Yeah.
So that is essentially the short version, the synopsis of it. So
I want to add something. I'm not really sure what he meant in his last statement about infinite, like he's talking about infinite explanations. But that's the thing is about the philosophy of science and the philosophy of epistemology, you cannot have an infinite amount of explanations or infinite amount of like ad infinitum of explanation, or else we'll never attain knowledge.
Yeah, and I think in some other, and I may be wrong, but in some other videos that I watched, he has held to the PSR. I mean, if he holds to the PSR, then there can't be an infinite amount of information.
Yes.
Like there's got to be an explanation for literally everything. There's going to be a finite amount of information for and to have a finite amount of explanations.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you cannot traverse the infinite, and even if you do it metaphysically, we will end up reaching like more epistemic nihilism, because we will never know anything. So in the philosophy of science and the philosophy of epistemology, the best explanation does not require an explanation, and that's it. And also he mentions like uncreated God he tries to equivocate it, if I'm not mistaken, he tried to equivocate it with an uncreated physical object under naturalism. But how can it be uncreated and then it'll have to possess the same attributes as that immaterial entity? It has to be eternal, independent, and basically not created. Nothing like this contingent reality.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How can he justify that under materialism? It wouldn't make any sense. It's incoherent and absurd. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You would be equivocating the contingent universe and everything within the universe with in comparing that to, and that's where a lot of atheists would say, well, we're special pleading for God, but God is a separate category of something that is non-contingent. So find me another non-contingent thing that I'm special pleading for.
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
Well, covered a lot of ground there. Why don't we back up and go to Kant? So you introduced these terms, the phenomenal realm and the noumenal realm. Would you be okay if we simply substituted the reality as we understand it for phenomenal realm and reality as it is for noumenal realm?
Yeah.
Because I'm a fan of.
There you go. There's the perfect way to do it. That's where he went in there and didn't try and make a fool of Tom. He just said, "Hey, would you be okay with us defining it in this term?"
Yeah, he's a gentleman. You know, he's a professional.
Of not using more specialist terminology than is required. And I think it's for our conversation, it's probably clearer if we just say how we understand reality to be and how it in fact is. So with that in mind, am I to understand that you are arguing for a universal skepticism about all of our beliefs, that we can't know that we have knowledge of anything? Is that succinctly? Is that?
You want to speed it up, or what?
Well, I'd say we can't have absolute knowledge. We can still have knowledge
Speed it up.
contextualized. For example, I can say,
If you want,
it appears to me that I am holding a cup.
Oh, it's already speed. It's already fast. Okay, yeah. No. Leave it as before. I thought it was slow, to be honest with you.
No, it was at 125 already.
Okay,
If we get to 1.5, we might have people comment and being like, "Hey, I don't understand what's going on."
Leave it at 125.
Because my perceptions don't necessarily need to cohere to the fundamental nature of reality. I'm only making a statement about my perceptions.
But you are. How do you define absolute knowledge? You said we can't have absolute knowledge.
About like the fundamental nature of reality. Like I can't say that I am definitely holding a cup because I could be in the Matrix, and so the cup may not exist. It could be false that I'm holding the cup, but I can still.
So absolute knowledge, you define it as
Did you say something?
No, I'm listening.
Oh, okay.
feasible knowledge.
that would be one.
Or incorrigible, in other words, incorrigible or indefeasible, meaning you could not be wrong about this.
Right, that would be one form of metaphysical knowledge. But I would say metaphysical knowledge would be just any fact that that we can know with that level of certainty is true about the fundamental nature of reality. So any fact itself would, in fact, like I could say, either I am alive or I am not, either I exist or I do not exist. That would technically be a metaphysical truth, but we don't know which one of those is in fact corresponding to reality.
Well, assuming you accept the law of excluded middle.
Right.
Yeah, see, so one of the things here is these days in epistemology, fallibilism is certainly the epistemology du jour, so that it's quite common, in fact, very common. It's sort of standard to say that insofar as we have knowledge as fallible and perspectival knowers, that we know from a particular angle. And so to set up the desire for absolute knowledge, the kind of knowledge that is indefeasible and incorrigible, that you could not be wrong about that knowledge, that is sort of a misbegotten project of a now widely recognized to have failed foundationalism. So, which you get back in people like Rene Descartes or maybe John Locke and the modernist project to try to have a decontextualized knowledge that is certain and could never fail you. So today it's much more common to say we can have knowledge, but we have knowledge as fallible perspectival knowers. And for example, Michael Polanyi, a well-known mid-20th century philosopher of science, described it as personal knowledge, that it is knowledge that you have this knowledge. And now, of course, we've kind of set aside for the moment how to define knowledge itself and perhaps come to that. But we can have knowledge knowing that we could be wrong about it. But nonetheless, you can still know something even though you could be wrong about it. So
I want to point that out. I want to point what he just said, because a lot of times, like when we get into the conversation about, like, for example, the Kalam, I'll keep bringing that up because that is the sticking point of most of my conversations with atheists nowadays is the Kalam, because that's where it all starts.
Yes.
He just said that we can have fallible information that we consider knowledge. Now, when looking at a philosophical argument like the Kalam is not stating any absolute ultimate facts. Yes. It is stating what is most reasonable to believe within the given universe and things that the inductive reasoning that we can use and the facts that we have in our universe. Just like the scientific method does not show any absolute facts, it just shows the best model that we currently have to explain our reality. So when an atheist says we haven't observed and demonstrated every single thing that begins to exist in reality having a cause, then we could never say that. That is you jumping to the statement that you have to have an absolute fact to be able to accept the premise itself, which is not the case.
Yes.
Would you disagree with that we can have that fallible knowledge?
Oh, no, I totally agree with that. I completely agree. My contention would be that if you're making a claim about something that has like these numinal properties of, by definition, not created, that would be something that would require the kind of absolute knowledge. And so those kinds of claims would be intrinsically unsupported.
So what do you mean? Like, I thought that we had said, yeah, well, instead of using phenomenal and noumenal, we'll just go to reality as we understand it and reality as it is. And so if we're going to talk about reality as it is, what's wrong with me saying that as a fallible knower, I can have fallible knowledge, but knowledge nonetheless of reality as it is? That if I look out the window right now and see that it is sunny, then all things being equal, I'm justified in believing it is sunny, and if it is indeed sunny, I can know that it is sunny. I don't see why there's a big problem there.
Right, I don't have any problem with that. My problem is that there's a contradiction when you say I can have fallible knowledge of some infallible property.
What do you mean by an infallible property?
Just a God which is by definition not created. That's kind of one of those properties that goes infinitely far into the unknown. And so you're saying you have fallible knowledge of this infinite property, or this infallible property, for lack of a better term.
Are you saying, when you say infallible property, you're meaning to refer to necessary beings?
Yes, the all-powerful, all-knowing, non-created, divine aseity, pure
okay,
actuality.
So for example,
labeling that is, you said fallible and infallible, so I'm just using those terms for right now. So I'm going to call that, that would be like infallible properties. And so we can't have fallible knowledge of those infallible properties. That's essentially what I'm arguing.
Yeah, I don't understand why you call those infallible properties. I mean, let's just set aside a rich theological framework and just ask this question. Can a person have fallible knowledge that there is an intelligence that created the universe, or that there's an intelligence that answers their prayers? Why not? Without packing into a whole list of divine attributes drawn from classical theism, such as simplicity, omnibenevolence, omnipotence, omniscience, immutability, impassibility, etc. Setting aside all that, why can't a person simply have fallible knowledge that there is an intelligence that created the universe who...
So right here, what T-Jump is saying is that there is a contradiction between having fallible knowledge of an infallible proposition.
Yeah.
Basically stating that God is omniscient, and that is contradictory. But aren't we conflating two separate topics here? The knowledge itself, and then the claim itself, whatever we are knowledgeable about.
Yeah.
There's nothing contradictory. That's A and B. We're not saying that A is fallible and A is also infallible. We're saying A is fallible and B is infallible.
Yeah. You're basically saying that, you're making, if I'm not mistaken, we're making a claim that could be fallible, and we're saying that in this claim, the entity is infallible. Is that what it is? The entity that we're discussing is infallible. So it's just like the mathematics when he talks about it later on.
1 + 1 = 2. Yeah, that's infallible knowledge.
Yeah, but according to T-Jump, it's fallible.
Yeah, I don't see how. It's objectively true that 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah.
I mean, before human beings existed, if you had two velociraptors standing next to each other, there'd still be two velociraptors whether a human mind existed or not.
Yeah, I mean, math is necessary truth in my opinion, because then you might as well just refute logic with logic and shoot yourself in the foot, and that's what T-Jump is doing with this. He keeps amalgamating the noumenal in this whole discussion. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Response to my prayers or something like that.
That would be totally fine. There's no contradiction there. That would not be what I would classify as infallible knowledge.
Okay, so a person can have fallible, justified beliefs and perhaps knowledge of God, knowledge only if God in fact exists, at least to that extent.
Well, I'd say that you can have justified fallible knowledge of something creating the universe and something responding to your prayers. That I'd be totally fine with that. But
Created in the universe?
Created the universe and responds to your prayers.
Okay.
But you couldn't say that. I would not extend that to the claim that thing could be not have been created. So you couldn't have fallible knowledge that thing was not created by something else. You couldn't have fallible knowledge that thing had infinitely power, was the most powerful, there wasn't something more powerful, that thing had all knowledge and there wasn't something else that didn't know or something more knowledgeable.
Let's for the moment that we assume, so we have a person, and let's say there is this being that created the universe and in intelligence created the universe and answers their prayers, and they have fallible knowledge that person created the universe and answers their prayers. Can that person have fallible knowledge that this individual has what is called strong immutability, so that, in other words, their core moral attributes at least don't ever change? Do they have knowledge of that?
I'm not sure. Like, you could say maybe it doesn't change, I guess, but you wouldn't be able to say it's like an objective morality, because you wouldn't be able to say that there wasn't something more moral or there was a better moral standard that could be out there.
But I don't understand. That's fully consistent.
Doesn't T-Jump have an argument for an objective morality that is the most least imposition of will upon people? Yeah. If he has that, then he's contradicting his statement that he just made.
Yes.
The fact that you could be wrong about something is consistent with fallible knowledge. So why couldn't that person have knowledge, but as a fallible, perspectival knower, that this individual who created the universe and answers their prayers is also immutable in the sense that they will not change in their moral character?
Well, I'd be happy to grant that it won't change, but I would not grant that it's an objective basis or it is the pinnacle of morality. I wouldn't grant that.
Well, I just said that they're strongly immutable.
Right.
But,
so I wasn't exactly sure what you meant by that, so I was covering both my bases there.
Okay. So then let's consider another attribute. Could they believe that this individual who answers their prayers and created the universe is also all-knowing? Is that possible? They couldn't believe that.
Yep. That would be one of those. I see there's a contradiction to say that you have fallible knowledge of this infallible property of all-knowing.
I don't call why. I think it's just a mislabeling to call that an infallible property. The property is the property of knowing all true propositions and believing no false ones.
Right. To say that there is something that knows everything and that there isn't something else that knows more or something that it doesn't know, I would consider that. And the word I'm using infallible just because it's the word you used at the beginning of.
This is where the conflation happens right here. Is when he's saying that you cannot have fallible knowledge about an all-knowing when it comes to the all-knowingness of this necessary being. The claim you cannot have fallible knowledge of an infallible attribute of whatever you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't he? In the beginning, he was talking about saying like, if we observe all of reality, we can eventually. What if there is another being that is more supreme than that being, and he mentions it here. So he's asking questions that are in context with this claim as well. You know, when we say something is we can be fallible about a claim that something is infallible, like within that discussion. This is in line with his thinking as well, with his questions. You know.
Yeah. Something to think about. I just saw that is why impossibility and possibility must be demonstrated. Well, how I would first ask, what do you mean by demonstrable? If you mean by demonstrable some type of empirical system, well then, do you believe? Are you a solipsist? Do you believe that other minds exist? Because if you do believe that other minds exist, and it is an empirical nature or empirical set of tools that you're using, then you could never believe that other minds exist according to this statement right here.
Yes, and also based on the laws of logic, you know, the law of non-contradiction, excluded middle, and the law of identity, you know, and causation, and all these laws, we apply them nonetheless. So, if I'm not mistaken, T-Jump violates a lot of these laws. For example, when he's asked later on in the video, he's asked about something, and he basically says, "I'm this and I'm that as well." So you can either be a bachelor or a married man. You can't, you know, the law of excluded.
Can't be both.
Yeah, you can't be both. You know what I'm saying? So you can only pick between two, and that's it.
The conversation just to create a distinction there. So it isn't like a technical term I'm using here. I'm just trying to use that as a distinction. So, but if you're trying to say that there's this thing that has absolute knowledge and there isn't something that doesn't know, or there isn't something that knows more than it, that would be one of those kinds of infallible absolute claims. And you couldn't justifiably say that you have fallible knowledge of this infallible claim.
Yeah. How about set aside God for the moment and consider something else? 1 + 1 = 2. So that's infallible, certainly, because 1 + 1 = 2 is understood to be necessarily true. And certainly if you're a Platonist, a realist about numbers, then you believe that those numbers themselves that are described in that equation are necessarily existent. It could not fail to exist. And that thus the relationships between 1, 1, and 2 described in that equation is necessarily true. So that would seem to be the very epitome of necessary and infallible knowledge of infallible, necessarily existent entities. But you're saying you couldn't even have fallible knowledge that 1 + 1 = 2. Is that correct?
Well, no, I'm saying you could have fallible knowledge 1 + 1 = 2. You couldn't have infallible knowledge of 1 + 1 = 2. Like, from my personal perspective, is that I grant Descartes' evil demon argument. I say 1 + 1 = 2 could be just a delusion in our brains in some way.
See how he said you couldn't have infallible knowledge? That's not what Randall was asking. He kind of moved to something else. He's now answering his own questions that he's coming up with. He says, can you have fallible knowledge of something like 1 + 1 = 2, which is which is infallible itself? 1 + 1 could not equal 3. It's infallible that it could equal 3. So his answer to that, his response to that was that you can't have infallible knowledge about this. Well, Randall never said that you could. He says, can you have fallible knowledge of the infallible?
Yeah, I think it's outside of his depth, you know, the intellectual depth, these type of discussions. And he's not, again, not to disrespect him, he's not really philosophically equipped with this the type of discussion, and he's learning as he goes along. I think that's his motives, you know, his method of operating, maybe, you know, that's how he does things. He learns as he goes along. You know?
There could be a 1 + 1 = 3 out there in some sense that we just can't comprehend. But I'm happy to grant that math and logic are metaphysical absolutes for the sake of argument.
Okay, so you can have fallible knowledge that 1 + 1 = 2, but you can't have fallible knowledge that there is a necessarily existent creator who brought the universe into existence.
Yes, I would grant that.
I just don't see the difference there.
That
you can have fallible knowledge of what you call an infallible property, but which I suggest you instead describe as necessarily existent, or essential property, or necessarily existent entity. That you can't have fallible knowledge of that when it's God, but you can when it's a mathematical equation or a Platonic number. And I'm wondering why you make that distinction. I still don't understand that.
Well, again, I don't. I still say that those things, you can't have fallible knowledge of those. Those aren't infallible. I say that math is purely conceptual. It's something in our heads, like language. So I don't say those are necessarily true. I say those are contingently true. But if I'm going to grant for the sake of argument that math and logic are necessarily true, I would say they're true simply by definition or something. There is no definition about existence that requires it to have been created by anything.
So you're saying mathematical equations are analytic truths rather than synthetic a priori truths?
Essentially, yeah.
And one of the problems with that is that it would seem, if that were true, if that were in fact correct, then you could know an equation without knowing the sum total of the equation.
Okay, so he used a term that not a lot of people understand. So I just want to make sure everybody's following along with the jargon that's being used. He used the word a priori. So a priori, and Mo, correct me if you have a different definition for it, but to me, a priori means coming to conclusions using reason. And then there's the opposite, which is a posterior, or
a posteriori.
A posteriori, which is more of a it's more of an empirical, yeah.
Yeah, in this one also he mentions like the analytic and synthetic. The synthetic a priori would be like, he will explain it, mathematics that is not intuitive. You have to do an equation and then you have to plug it in a calculator and then it pops up. And then the analytic one would be based on definitions. So like the married bachelor analogy, you have to know what a bachelor is by definition, and then what a married man is by definition, and then through intuition you quickly can grasp the idea and basically know that there is a contradiction or it follows. You can assess it basically. But yeah, go ahead.
I mean, that if you knew the one, you should know automatically the other. And that is in the same way. For example, let me give you another example. If you understand what it means to be a bachelor, then you know that a bachelor is an unmarried male. Likewise, because all bachelors and unmarried male is an analytic truth. So you could say truth by definition. If mathematical equations were analytic truths by definition in that trivial sense, then to know the first part of an equation, the numbers being added up, would be to know the sum total of it automatically, because you would already know it, because it's an analytic trivial truth. And yet the fact is that we actually have to work out our equations. So if, for example, I said to you, well, what's 345 multiplied by 272? You need to get a calculator and work that out. You don't automatically know the equation, the conclusion, the sum total of it. And that's because it's not an analytic truth. It's in fact what philosophers call a synthetic a priori truth.
Right, but I wouldn't consider any significant distinction there, because it's simply a translation tool. You're using a translation to go from the multiplication process to what it translates into. It's kind of like looking at a Japanese word, and you have to, well, how do you translate this to English? They are by definition the same thing. You just have to find a dictionary because you don't know them in your head.
Except that you're not translating here. So I think the analogy breaks down there, that we're not translating a word from Japanese, like arigato, into English, thank you. What we're doing is working out an equation, and the fact is that if it were an analytic truth, then you would automatically know the conclusion in virtue of knowing the sum, the parts that form the conclusion. And in fact, we don't know that, the numerators and denominators.
Well, I'd consider that the same as a translation.
Okay. Oh,
He just showed him how it wasn't. Like 1 + 1 is not translating anything. It's just saying that this is the sum of the equation.
Yes.
How is that analogous to arigato? You're not. Thank you is not the sum of arigato.
Yeah, it's just language and definitions, and like you said in the beginning, it's not something that you need to go through. Like it's more analytic than synthetic.
Mm-hmm.
So let's then swing back to God, maybe. No, sorry, you're saying that this is a special problem for making claims about all necessarily existent beings. I mean, you've said infallible properties, but I've suggested you ought instead speak about necessarily existent entities. But it's so are you saying, like, what is the actual target of your skepticism here? Is it necessarily existent entities?
Yeah.
Okay, so anything that you say exists of necessity, we cannot know with fallible knowledge that it exists.
Yeah.
Or have any beliefs about it.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, now you gave an example earlier from the law of excluded middle that you either exist or do not exist. Now that would seem to be necessarily true.
Right.
So that is necessarily describing a state of affairs, a macro state of affairs, that either you exist or do not exist. But it would seem that that is actually the epitome of knowledge. But if you're correct, then you cannot even know that fallibly.
Well, no, I'd go further than that. I'd say you can know one or the other. Either I exist or I don't exist. But if you want to say I do exist or I do not exist, one of those two, you pick one. That's the part that's unsupported. So I grant that there has to be a necessary something. But if you want to say something about that necessary thing, that's the unsupported part.
Well, so what I'm just saying is that it is true, giving a truth statement, it is true that either you exist or you do not exist. That is, if that's true, and that is necessarily true, then that would seem to be the epitome of infallible knowledge. But from what you've been saying, we can't have infallible knowledge of such things. In fact, we can't even have fallible knowledge of such things.
Well, no, I grant that there are certain things that we can't have fallible knowledge of infallible things, like I think, therefore I am. So I can grant that, and I'm happy to grant math and logic, even though I personally don't. So if you want, I'm okay with those. Though they're not the same, because those are true. Those couldn't be otherwise. They're incorrigible, like what you said. Whereas statements about what this necessary thing are not incorrigible.
Yeah.
Kind of like if I said I exist, that's not incorrigible because I could not exist.
Because it's possible that you might not exist. So we can come back to what I've been trying to do here, which is
there's mic drop number 1.
To build up a richer and richer concept of God that you have been willing to concede. So thus far, you've been willing to concede. Well, it is possible to know that there is to have fallible knowledge of the existence of an intelligence that created the universe and responds to prayers and has an immutable character. And I would all say already at that point, you were at a minimal conception of God. So,
well, I'd say none of those actually have anything to do with the necessary existence. Those could all just be like an alien. There could be an alien that created the universe, and an alien that answers your prayers, and an alien that has an immutable character. So none of those get you to the noumenal or the necessary existence qualities.
Well, I haven't talked about God's necessary existence, right? I've simply talked about a creator of the universe who answers my prayers, who has an immutable moral character.
Right. So my only argument right now is against the necessary parts. That's the necessary properties. All of the other properties I'd have different arguments against. Right now, argument is presented just against the necessary stuff. Yeah.
So I'm pointing out. So we can have fallible knowledge of a being to that level. Now, what about having knowledge that being sent his son into the universe 2,000 years ago to become human and to take on human nature while retaining a divine nature? And to die and rise for the sins of human beings. In principle, can a person have fallible knowledge of that?
Sure.
Okay, so right there, that you've already conceded really sort of the essence, the heart or core of Christian belief. So I'd say that's pretty good for a day's exchange.
Well,
yeah, I just want to know, why would he say like we can have fallible knowledge of something that is infallible or fallible? I mean, this is, it sounds contradictory to me, Why can't you just say, okay, if this is because is that statement in of itself infallible or fallible now? We have to ask the question. If he's saying that this statement is fallible, to believe that something is infallible, is that statement in of itself fallible or infallible? If you're going to say it's infallible as well, then we're just going to keep digressing.
Yeah. I mean, the statement itself, the knowledge that's said to be had, is infallible or is fallible. The things that you're talking about, whether they are fallible or infallible, is completely arbitrary to the knowledge itself being fallible or infallible. I could say that I believe that I am the greatest human being on the planet. That is an infallible statement, but the knowledge that I say that I would have would be fallible knowledge. So, I mean, there's nothing unreasonable or contradictory about that statement. I may be wrong, and that's why the knowledge is fallible, because I could be wrong.
Yes.
Just to put that out there, I don't think I'm the greatest human being on the planet. Somebody's gonna take that little clip and be like, "Look at this guy. He thinks he's on top of the world." All right. But yeah, that was mic drop number 2, to where Tom Jump concedes that Randall Rouser's belief in God is reasonable. To which I've never heard anybody get Tom to say anything remotely close to that statement. So my hats off to Randall.
Yes.
again, so there's two arguments here. One, the first half of my epistemology is just saying we can't get to the noumenal stuff, the necessary stuff. The second half of my epistemology is going through all the individual claims, like did Jesus rise from the dead, do the arguments for an intelligent creator exist. And I reject all of those also. So I'm going to reject those based on the second half of my epistemology, but I haven't presented that.
Yeah, but this first part of your epistemology is fully congruent with a person having knowledge of basic Christian doctrine.
Yes.
Now, you did say, when you refer back to the noumenal realm, and again, I prefer just to say reality as it is, but then you said noumenal realm and you said necessary.
Well, yeah, I thought that's what you said. You said instead of saying noumenal, you're supposed to say the necessary existence.
Well, no, so as I said, when I talk about noumenal reality, or when Kant does, it's simply reality as it is.
Where did he get necessary existence from noumenal?
I think he's conflating, he's conflating the definition of noumenal with like something, a claim, like a abstract a claim, like anything metaphysical. And from what I've like when I was watching it, from what I could assess, is that's what he's assuming. He's assuming that noumenal can be something metaphysical. Any metaphysical claim.
Yeah.
Is noumenal.
Original Wind Productions in the chat put something good up. It quoted Tom by saying we can't get to the noumenal stuff. How does he know we can't get there without knowing something about it?
Exactly, yeah, because at the end of the day, the only thing that we can assess with our metaphysics is the phenomenal, as Immanuel Kant will say. So the noumenal, just leave it alone. It's just an assumption that, hey, this might be something else. The cup might be perceived as something else that we don't know what it is based on our faculties.
Yeah.
Apart from our knowing or our mental structures. So, I'm willing to just at this point say I think I've gotten pretty far in this conversation. I'd like to maybe shift over, if you don't mind, and to probe a little bit more on your basic assumptions as to what knowledge is. So how do you define knowledge and some of these other questions like justified true belief, rationality? How do you define those? Because the way you define those concepts provides the framework in which...
This is a very important part if you're to have conversations, and I believe conversations with anybody, really, but I've studied this a little bit after I've heard it. These are great questions to ask when in conversations with anybody, especially for me personally when I'm speaking with atheists that come to me to figure out why the Kalam convinced me and why all these other arguments convinced me. We have to start with questions like this that he's about to start asking Tom, and you'll see exactly why they are important as I think they are.
Which your subsequent epistemology is developed, right? So it's important to have clear definitions of what those concepts are. So right. Knowledge. How do you define knowledge?
Just a fact that corresponds to reality, or something like that.
Or something like that.
Well, of course, there's no mention of a knower in there. So, and I would say a fact corresponding to reality. The problem with that is that that's trivial because by definition, a fact is a true statement or one that corresponds to reality. So the first thing you'd want to have in your definition of knowledge, in addition to facts, is a knower. So a person who believes the facts, so for it to be knowledge, would be for you to believe the fact. But it would seem we'd also need something more than belief in the fact, because there are many things we can believe that turn out to be true, they turn out to be facts, but nonetheless, we might stumble upon that true belief or knowledge, or that stumble upon that true belief by happenstance. So, for example, let's say
Gettier problems.
Well, not even Gettier problems. This is before you get to Gettier problems, but that's a higher level discussion. But this is even like I'm just saying, even if you have say, well, knowledge is true belief. Well, no, it's not just that, because you could believe something for not good reasons, right? So let's say, for example, Donald Trump, I suppose, says true things every once in a while. And if you just believe everything Donald Trump says, and you happen to believe something he says that is in fact true, it wouldn't follow necessarily that you know it, because Donald Trump is known to be generally unreliable when it comes to relaying the truth. And so you actually should not have believed that based upon the larger framework of his general unreliability. And so you would not know it even though it were a true belief. And that's not even at the level yet of Gettier problems. So you would want to have at the very least some justification, which that person wouldn't have if they just believe everything Donald Trump says uncritically. You'd want to have the true belief, and you'd also want to have justification. Now, you mentioned Gettier problems. Gettier problems arise in the circumstances where you can actually have true belief and justification and still have something that it would seem you do not know. And so, for example, a simple example, Bertrand Russell actually gave this example 30 years before Edmund Gettier wrote his famous paper in 1963. Russell says, And he didn't actually appreciate that this was a big problem at the time. But he says, you're walking along and you look at the town clock and it says 3:20, and it is in fact 3:20. So you're justified in believing it, and it is in fact true. Do you know it? Well, what if the clock broke 12 hours ago at 3:20 a.m. and is just now giving that time, and you happen to look up and see? So you have met justification and true belief, but it still seems that you do not know it. And that's why philosophers have been saying we need to have something more than justification and true belief in order to define knowledge. And that's where I would come in myself. I'm deeply influenced by the Plantingan approach to say I think it's important to have an externalist approach to knowledge, and I would understand that in terms of proper function. But I would want to know how you would understand it.
Right. So my epistemology addresses this problem by classifying knowledge into three groups. You have conceptual knowledge, empirical knowledge, and metaphysical knowledge. Each one has a different level of justification to make it reasonable to believe. So conceptual knowledge is anything you think. If you think that's conceptual knowledge, you're justified in believing it just because you thought it. Empirical knowledge is knowledge that's knowledge about the world, like an externalist view of knowledge, where there's something existing in the world. And in order to be justified in believing empirical knowledge, you need to have empirical evidence, or it needs to be verified in some scientific kind of a way. And then there's metaphysical knowledge. Metaphysical knowledge is the kind of noumenal, absolute, necessary, reality as it really is kind of a thing. And in order to be justified in those, there is no way, essentially, that I know, except for I think.
Yeah, you see, he conflates noumenal with metaphysical. This is exactly where he gives a definition now. And that's his problem, with the noumenal. He should abandon and drop the noumenal as an advice, just get rid of the noumenal and stick to the phenomenal and just let's.
Yeah. And I've even heard, from atheists that I talk to, them describing these different classes of knowledge.
Yeah.
And the question is that I never get an answer to is where you draw the line in the sand between each of these. Like what claims require that empirical evidence and what claims just require a priori, knowledge.
Yes.
Where do you draw the line on this must have actual empirical evidence for the claim?
Yeah, exactly. You can't amalgamate science with the metaphysical claims, because that, like I said in the beginning, that discipline only deals with empiricism, and it even presupposes empiricism and rationality. But if you study the philosophy of science, so people now they're talking about epistemology, and you should stick to that branch of philosophy, and that's it, not go beyond that and go into empirical data when you're discussing God. God is beyond the physical; it's a metaphysical reality. Go ahead.
There's no justification for those kinds of knowledge.
Okay, so you talked about three different kinds of knowledge as you understand it, but you haven't given a core definition of knowledge. So I assume that there is a core conceptual framework shared by those three examples of knowledge. And so what for you is that core conceptual shared content of knowledge that is shared by these three forms of knowledge?
Probably like a correspondence between the claim and the justification for the claim, something like that.
Okay, well, so you're saying, in essence, justified true belief?
But it's more than that. It's justified true belief that has a correspondence between the justification and the claim. So they have to be the same kind of a thing.
Well,
that can all fit into the classification of justification if you want.
So are you an internalist about knowledge?
Yeah, knowledge is just something we have to believe. So knowledge is a belief in our heads, and whether or not that belief corresponds to existing things or true things in reality outside of our head.
Like, are you familiar with internalism and externalism, that distinction?
Yeah, where internalism is the stuff in our head and imagination, and externalism is the stuff outside of us and what exists in reality.
Somewhat. So the core idea here is for internalism, you need to have internal awareness of your reasons or grounds or evidence for a belief in order to be justified in holding that belief. For externalism, there are at least some subset of knowledge in which you do not have to be aware of the underlying evidence or justification for that belief in order to have justified belief or to have knowledge. And so I'm an externalist, and I'm wondering if you're an externalist or an internalist.
All right, let's give a few definitions here.
Okay.
Let's go back here. Okay, so internalism is the thesis that no fact about the world can provide reasons for action independently of desires and beliefs. Externalism is the thesis that reasons are to be identified with objective features of the world.
Okay.
So just if anybody didn't understand what they mean by internalism and externalism, it also says that externalism is a group of positions in philosophy of mind which argues that the conscious mind is not only the result of what is going on inside of the nervous system or the brain, but also what occurs or exists outside of the subject itself.
Yeah, I'd be externalist in the sense that they're both. There are both kinds. Things that are justified just by knowing them internally, and things that are justified by having an external source.
Okay, so let's, for example, if Christianity is true, or something like Christianity is true, and God speaks to people and reveals himself to people through means like prayer, then there's no problem in principle with God communicating directly to a person. And all things being equal, again, we're talking fallible knowledge here. It's fallible. It's feasible. You could be wrong. But all things being equal, in the same way that you can communicate to me and share something of your will that you want me to do, God can communicate directly to a person and communicate something of what God wants them to do. And in both cases, I am justified prima facie in accepting that you have expressed your will to me, or that God has expressed God's will to me. And so there's no epistemological problem with that, even if I don't have any greater understanding, justification of how something works, but I can know that much and still have justified externalist knowledge. You're okay with that?
No, I would reject that. I would say that you have internalist knowledge of the God, but to have externalist knowledge, you need to have some other basis. Like, the reason it's reasonable to believe that you conveyed your will to me is because on top of my conceptual or internalist evidence that I can understand it, I have externalist evidence of all of the empirical scientific stuff of humans and biology and chemistry and neurology and the fact that people exist and people talk and all these other things. So I can combine those two and give a justified, both internalist from the fact I understand it and externalist view that you exist. You can't do that for God. You only have the internalist view, which only justifies the internalist conclusion that God's in your head, from my view.
Let's maybe back up. How do you, is your belief that that you're talking to another mind, that is to me, and you're not the only mind that exists, so solipsism is false. Is that a belief that you hold, because I assume you hold it?
Yes.
Is that a belief that you hold externalistically or internalistically?
Both. I have the internalist.
Well, it can't be both. You can't be both.
Well, remember,
that's contradictory. You can't be both internalistically and externalistically. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's violating like the law of excluded middle.
Excluded middle, yeah.
The same with the bachelor and married announcement.
Mm-hmm. Hey, he might as well say that he believes in married bachelors.
Yeah.
there's different kinds of knowledge can be justified some can be justified internally and some can be justified externally. So,
yes, so the question is, do you need to have evidence and arguments for the falsity of solipsism in order to be justified in believing that solipsism is false?
Yes.
Oh, yes, you do.
Yes, from my viewpoint, by using like scientific verification that meets the criteria of what I qualify externalist justification. So I'm justified in believing that you exist because I have the scientific evidence that there are other people and how computers work and how signals work and how.
Okay. So first of all, that would follow from that. I'm assuming that you do have that arguments all in place. That would nonetheless imply that the vast majority of people on Earth who clearly don't have access to all that evidence that you've just referenced, they are not justified in believing that there are minds other than their own. And so one thing I would say is that that's an implausible conclusion, that we should actually be a little bit skeptical of developing epistemologies that have very implausible consequences, such as that the vast majority of people on Earth are not justified in believing other minds exist. But I'd also want to come to a second point, and that brings us back to something that you've referenced earlier in this exchange, and that was the idea of underdetermination. So I would wonder, why don't you face a problem of underdetermination here? So for people watching that maybe have forgotten what that is, underdetermination applies. You gave an example, a nice example of having a box and it weighs 2 pounds and you conclude that there's a rabbit in there. But it's possible, that's consistent with many other things being in the box and it weighing 2 pounds. And so we're not justified in believing that there's a rabbit in there. By the same token, it would seem that all the evidence that you've cited from science is fully compatible with you being the only mind that exists and you having generated all the sensory experiences that you're now interpreting as science. And so how would you get beyond that to have an adequate argument to justify your belief in other minds internalistically in the way that you've deemed necessary?
All right, so your first question was, do other people who don't have the information I list, are they justified in believing there's other minds? I would say yes, because they do have experience of other people. And the experience of the other people is them having the same properties that you have. And if they have those properties, you can label things that have these properties are things that have minds. So that's the internalist justification. If it meets this set of internalist criteria, it is defined as a mind. And those criteria, of course, are external things. So we have the internalist definition of what qualifies as a mind, plus the externalist verification of does it have these properties. We put those together, we have yes, it's justified to have a mind. But then we have the problem of underdetermination. They could all be philosophical zombies. So your second question is, with underdetermination, do I face it? Yes. Can I solve it? No. But I don't need to, because my claim isn't of the infallible kind. If it was of the infallible kind, then it would be an unjustified claim for me to make any of those. But because I'm making a claim that isn't of the infallible kind, I'm only making the claim that it meets my definition of what I call this thing, then I don't need to be able to solve the problem of underdetermination.
Okay, so I'll leave aside your first point Although, it's an interesting response, that, well, maybe I won't leave it as that. I'll say a little bit about it. So the first point being that the average person is justified in believing that there are minds other than themselves because these other things that they're coming into encounter with are sufficiently like them. Okay, one thing I would want to say, though, is that you'd still have to say that people go through a process of reasoning, that they reason.
I just want to add something. I want to emphasize on the solipsism problem because it seems like a lot of people have a hard time with it. And I think the best explanation is this, that it could be all in your head at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. Even if you see other people who have the same, who look like you and have the same build and, have eyes, ears, and consciousness, and they can talk and interact, it can be all in your head.
Yeah.
Just like the analogy of the 5 minutes ago. Everything could have happened 5 minutes ago. It can be all put in your head. Like if someone tells you, okay, I'm going to bring camera evidence, that can be all in your head 5 minutes ago too. So people need to understand this is the hard problem of solipsism. It could be all just in your head. You cannot justify it outside of it. So the best thing to do to have a coherent worldview is to just accept reality, but the way it is. You know what I'm saying? And that other people exist. And I don't know what T-Jump is trying to do exactly. I'm having a hard time understanding him, but he sounds like something, perhaps, some people who try to justify through empiricism. And that's what Randall was saying. All the scientific data, all the scientific knowledge that you could have accumulated and gathered and assessed could also be all in your head. You know what I'm saying? And that's the whole problem.
That's the whole reason why there's a hard problem, is because even though Tom says, well, I observe, we experience other people. Well, that's not evidence. That's I have dreams of other people existing. Are they real?
Exactly.
No, they're just figments of my imagination. So how do you know if empirical evidence is required for your claims to be substantial to have a good reason to believe, or justified true beliefs, or even justified beliefs? You would need something more than just I experience it. Yes. I lucid dream, so I experience dragons once a week.
Yeah.
Tuesday nights I'll go to sleep and I'll fly around on dragons all night long. I experience dragons. So do dragons exist? No.
Yes. Exactly. And who knows?
Sensory experience that I'm experiencing, which I'm calling mom, seems to be adequately like me, and I'm conscious, so I can thereby infer that this sensory experience is in fact another conscious being. Hey, mom is conscious, yay! And so the first thing I want to say is I don't think that people actually do reason in the way that you described. So even if I can see that were open to them, that they could reason in that way, I don't think they do, and so they think they'd still be unjustified based upon your proposed model. And I think that it's actually quite different. I think that the vast majority of people don't go through a reasoning process in order to believe that there are other minds. I think rather they form those beliefs in a properly basic way, that they form it through a non-discursive means. In other words, they're not reasoning to a conclusion from premises. They just naturally form the belief that I'm interacting with another human being, there's a mind of my own.
Just to emphasize on that, but since like properly basic beliefs are basically like things that are, I would say, axiomatic, things that you don't need, like you said, you don't need a premise. You don't need the like a syllogism. They're just properly basic belief. You come to like I exist, you exist, these type of things. I have rational faculties, consciousness, cognition, and so on.
Yeah.
The real world is real, and so on.
I think we might be wrapping up here because basically they just go round and round in circles for the rest of the time here. So we might move on. I'm going to send Amy. Amy in the chat has been very active, and she said she'd like to come on and talk to us.
Just so you know, this is as far as I went as well when I was watching it alone. So
yeah, you pretty much got everything summed up. Now basically he's just getting to the bottom. Tom basically states that if you reason like I do, then you're justified in believing these things. And what Randall is pointing out is that people normally don't reason in the way that Tom Jump is reasoning right now. We're not on a consistent logical basis when we reason for things, just through everyday human being. And if the only way to be justified in having certain beliefs like other minds exist is if we were to reason like Tom Jump is saying that he reason that he comes to the reason that to believe that other minds exist, that most everybody in the world does not have a justified belief that other minds exist.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, no disrespect to the guy, you know, he seems like a nice guy, you know, but he's not philosophically trained. He's not philosophically trained in this topics that he just, he knows how to talk, he knows how to argue, but it's mostly bombastic, to be honest with you. It's nothing of, like, it's not philosophy, you know, it's nothing of, like, it doesn't make sense. He doesn't make sense most of the time. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. All right, we'll watch a little bit more. Amy, I just put a link in the chat for you to jump on and join us here. We'll just kind of watch a little bit more of this, and then once you come on, we'll bring you on screen.
Now the second point. So on the second point, though, I think to come back to you're saying, well, but I'm okay with having fallibilistic knowledge that solipsism is false, and I'm still a little bit at a loss as to understand why we can make grand metaphysical claims such as solipsism is false fallibilistically, but we can't make grand metaphysical claims such as theism is true fallibilistically.
All right, we can't. So I'm not saying solipsism is false metaphysically or in the sense, that kind of true sense. I'm saying that I define a mind as anything that has these properties. Now, I could be wrong. I don't care if I'm wrong. I'm just going to define anything that has these properties as a mind. Now, I'm not saying minds exist. I'm not saying solipsism is false. I'm not saying anything about the fundamental nature of reality. I'm just saying anything that has these properties, I personally define it as having a mind. So I'm not making those kinds of absolute claims. I'm only making a very tentative claim about my personal definition of how I define a mind.
Yeah, so I mean, certainly we all have to start somewhere. I mean, I think we all have a sense of basic understanding of a mind as having consciousness or sentience, self-awareness, the ability to act intentionally or with purpose, and so that's fine. And then we can form beliefs. I'm just saying we can have those fallibilistic justification to form beliefs about the ultimate nature of reality, what you've called the noumenal realm, what I've just said, let's just call ultimate reality or reality in itself, including solipsism is false. Why can't we likewise say fallibilistically theism is true?
Right, I agree with you. I agree with everything you just said. So I'm not saying solipsism is false. I cannot say that. I cannot justify the claim solipsism is false.
You can't justify that fallibilistically?
Right, no, I cannot justify that. All I can say is that I define minds this way. I don't know what the fundamental nature of reality is. I could be the only mind. But that level of a description of reality itself or ultimate reality isn't something I'm saying. I'm not making any claims about ultimate reality. I'm only making a claim about the apparent reality that I experience. In the apparent reality I experience, I can say that there are other minds or things I define as other minds. But I've made no claim about reality itself. My statement does not extend into reality itself.
So why?
Something. You see, that the thing is, the mind, you cannot even explain it like our metaphysical faculties, the rationality, cognition, metacognition, consciousness. If we can look, he's having a hard time explaining all this stuff, and he's assuming physical or pantheism.
Yeah.
If he's having a hard time explaining these things, and it's not based on empiricism and physical stuff, physical processes, then this indicates that it's something mystical. We don't know what it is, and I'm going to use that definition because I believe Al-Ghazali uses something close to it, that consciousness, cognition, even free will. You cannot, you don't know the ingredients of these things. It's something mystical beyond us, beyond our knowledge. Even the Quran says, they ask you about the spirit. Say the spirit is from the command of your Lord. So it's something for blind knowledge. You know what I mean? It's something from the sublime at the end of the day. So that's why, to me, all these things are hard to explain. The hard problem of consciousness, hard problem of solipsism, and all these things. And he's having a hard time explaining the mind and all that. And you just run into a lot of problems. You just got to accept it and take it as it is. You know, a properly basic belief.
Yeah, I agree. Let me jump back. Here it is. Amy said she'd be on in a few minutes. I just pinned the message up top, so I'm going to bring Amy on, and then once we'll talk to Amy for a little bit, and if we have some time, we'll get the next person on that comes in.
This is important to define knowledge. We're back to the definition of knowledge. If we've said that knowledge is having a true belief that is sort of grounded or perhaps in some cases justified. So, I mean, it doesn't all have to be justified in the sense of evidential justification if you're an externalist, but grounded or justified and true knowledge or true belief. If that's what knowledge is, I certainly don't understand why you cannot have knowledge, fallible knowledge perhaps, but knowledge nonetheless that solipsism is false. One of the things we want to come back to here is sort of this, maybe back to Rene Descartes. So when Rene Descartes, he wants to, in his own day, defeat the skeptics. he begins by assuming a principle of skepticism even more radical than the skeptics of his day, and says he will doubt everything, even doubt that he exists, and see what I can come up with. So the problem there, I think, with the Cartesian method, such as it's been given to it, is that it sets up reasoned thought and rationality as a one-sided affair, that it is about exercising doubt and skepticism. But as Anthony Kenny famously, well, I think should be more famous, pointed out, that in fact rationality is the golden mean, sort of the Aristotelian virtue that finds the balance between excessive skepticism and excessive credulity. So you can indeed be too credulous and believe too much and be unjustified, but you can likewise be too skeptical and be unjustified in your skepticism, and that is as much a problem as excessive credulity. And so I would wonder why you, when you are unwilling to say that you can even know that there is a mind other than your own that exists, why you are not being unduly skeptical and thus not rational in the way that someone like Anthony Kenny would describe, because of your excessive skepticism of your own cognitive faculties.
I was told this when I was an atheist, and boy, oh boy, did I get pissed off. I'm like, what do you mean be too skeptical? Like, really? Like, what are you talking about? And the way that he described that is perfect. I totally understand what was meant when I was told you can be too skeptical, because there's a fine line between extreme skepticism and cynicism. When you just go too far, and that goes to what you talk about more all the time, atheism leading to nihilism, because just the cynicism that can come along with being too skeptical just gets you nowhere. You eventually have to just throw everything, including existence, out the window.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. You have to be, you become like a lamppost, or not even that. You become a ghost or something, I don't know, you don't exist. You don't value anything. Your own existence, matter of fact,
Right. That goes back to where I defined my my definition of knowledge, where there's 3 tiers of knowledge: the conceptual, empirical, metaphysical. Making those metaphysical claims about what reality is really like, those are all unsupported. We can't justify those. But we can still have empirical knowledge, the kind of fallibilistic knowledge that you were talking about of the phenomenal world of the world as we experience it. And we can define those things perfectly well. We can have perfect knowledge of those things, of the world as we experience it. The only thing we can't have is knowledge of reality as itself. So I make a distinction between those two and say we can have empirical knowledge of the world, and I can have empirical knowledge of other minds, and I can have empirical knowledge of Australia existing, but I can't have any metaphysical knowledge of those things. The metaphysical category is out. That's the reality as it is category.
I'm a little puzzled why we can't have fallible knowledge of ultimate reality. Because I come back to, like, I look up the window, it seems to be sunny outside, assuming I have no defeaters, that it is sunny outside. Why cannot I be justified in believing it is sunny outside? And if it is in fact sunny outside, then I have knowledge that it is sunny outside.
Right, because I'd say that everything you just experienced was a description of the phenomenon or the world as we experience it, and that is a description of the reality that we experience. But the description of the reality we experience has no necessary correlation to the description of reality as it is. Those are 2 separate categories. So I still think reality as we experience it is reality. I call that reality, but it's not the same as the fundamental reality as it is kind of thing. Those are 2 separate categories. So you'd be justified in saying, I can understand reality as I experience it, or the reality we experience this way. And that's justified. But you would not be justified to extend from that to reality, the fundamental reality as it is like this.
Well, when you connected just now, a reality as I experience it with reality as it is, and said there's no necessary connection. Now, I would assume that by saying there's no necessary connection, that's a way of tracking on to what I earlier described as no indefeasible knowledge or incorrigible knowledge or certain knowledge about which you could not possibly be wrong. But of course, if you are a fallibilist in your epistemology, then you don't require there to be a necessary connection between your experience of reality and reality as it is. We can have fallible knowledge such that we could be wrong, but it is still knowledge. So yes, it is possible that I'm sleeping right now. I mean, I've had some very vivid dreams in which I thought I was awake, but nonetheless, it seems to me I'm awake, and all things being equal, when I look out the window, I think I'm justified in believing I am awake and that it is in fact sunny outside in reality and not simply in my dream. So again, I think that what we're really bumping up to here is not so much an objection against God per se, but it seems to me that there is I'm going to put it a little provocatively, a lingering hangover of Cartesian angst that we want to continue to hold on to the demand, the expectation, the assumption that for knowledge to be worthwhile, knowledge has to be certain, infallible, incorrigible, and indefeasible. And I'm saying we don't need to have that. We can have knowledge of the world as it seems to us from our perspective, and that's good enough. And in fact, I think that that's what Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, where he says we see darkly as through a glass. I think that adequately describes our epistemological situation as knowing human beings.
Right. So from my perspective, in order to describe reality as itself, even in a fallible sense, we need some kind of a probability, some kind of a numerator and a denominator in order to establish what is the likelihood that what we're
probability. Let's play this next part, and Amy's in the background. We'll get her on in just a second.
experiencing is or is not a description of reality in itself. And from my perspective, there is no denominator for that equation. There's nothing we have that gives us access to anything in that reality as itself kind of category that can give us a denominator, that can give us even a percentage point of probability of whether or not what we're experiencing is a description of that reality in itself. So we should just abandon that completely and just say reality is a model or a caricature that we can understand through phenomenal or through reality as we experience it means. And we should build reality from the bottom up in this kind of a way and just say, this is as far as we can know, or this is as far as we can build a model of reality. But this model of reality has no real correlation or necessary correlation to what reality is really, really like. So, because for example, in discoveries in physics, most of the stuff we experience is wrong. Like if we hold an object, hold a glass, and we think it's a solid object, 99% of it is empty space. We see colors, but colors don't actually exist. They're just a product of our mind because of different wavelengths of light. Most of the reality we experience doesn't exist or does not correspond to the way reality actually is. It's a caricature.
Oh, so you said the objection as you raised it was in terms of probability, that if we are going to have this knowledge of the things in itself, the noumenal realm, reality, that we need to be able to identify the probability that we are in fact.
You know where he's going with this.
So that very principle, I would ask, what's the probability of that principle? If you've already said you accept it because you've appealed to it, so what is the probability of that principle itself being true? And if you don't have that probability, then you've just undercut the very principle that you're appealing to.
What do you mean true? Is it, how would it be? Like it's not a true-false statement, true-false question, I don't think.
Well, if you said in order to have knowledge of reality or the noumenal realm, we need to be able to calculate the probability that our knowledge or our beliefs match up to that reality and in fact accurately describe it. And I said, well, that itself is a principle which you believe because you just appealed to it. And so I said, okay, then that principle must apply to itself. So what is that probability of the principle itself being true? And if you don't have that probability, then why do you accept it? Because it's self-defeating.
Yes, he's spot on, because this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is like the philosophy of science, and what underpins the scientific method, the philosophical underpinnings, which the scientific method itself cannot examine. It's all metaphysics now. So he's asking him the question, what are you going to use to assist this claim?
Exactly. And it's kind of like when you're speaking with an empiricist, you say, do you believe that the only way to come to reasonable conclusions is if you have empirical evidence to demonstrate the claim that you're making? They say, oh, well, of course. So what's your demonstrable evidence for that statement that you just agreed to right there? Well, I don't have any. Well, then doesn't that completely undercut your entire the statement, the context of the statement itself? But let's go ahead. We got Amy in the back. Amy, how's it going?
I'm doing good. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Woohoo!
How have you been since the last time we spoke?
I've been doing pretty good. I feel so bad. I'm sending love to all the chat. I know I can send the tennis balls back and forth, but I've been doing good. How have you guys been doing?
I've been fantastic. Mm-hmm.
I've been good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So you were speaking about a few different things. You were speaking about a few different things in the chat. Is there anything that you'd like to talk to us about specifically?
Sure. And it's funny. Maybe I should stick away from the one topic that you were talking about. All the atheists. I'll actually say, we'll actually put Kalam over here to a second. I have a thought for you that I'm interested. I am very much a computer science-y type of person, a biology type of person. Okay. And I have been searching for a methodology to create and replicate synthetic versions of consciousness. I know that sounds a little out there, but that's my shtick. And in it becoming my shtick, it's given me very clear-cut definitions of consciousness, of mind and brain, sentience and introspection, which are, I have a model. And I guess my question would be, is God conscious?
Yeah, we would say, and Mo, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure that we would say yes. God is conscious itself. God has a mind, but it's not in a sense to where you can anthropomorphize God as having parts. What I would ask you is, with you saying that you want to create some type of synthetic consciousness of some sort with like a computer system. Are you familiar with the philosophical paradox called the Chinese room?
Yes, that is where you could technically have a speaker feeding you Chinese characters and in a room, and you could translate the Chinese characters, blah, 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 and you could be writing symphonies, poetry, but you wouldn't actually know what's going on because you're just the translator following steps.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is it. Yes.
And do you want to say how I would see? I don't know. I understand the problem. I think I view our consciousness as something a little bit different. I guess you could say our consciousness is a translator in that it's translating information. But I think, unlike in the example, I think we can know things. I think we can gain context. I think it's possible to be just a program and just churn out things like that example. Is that something?
Do you believe that human beings are, because I think you would agree with me that like a computer system is just an input output, input of information, output of information, uploading and downloading. Would you agree? Would you think that human beings are simply just input output, or is there something else? There's something different about how we operate that we call consciousness. That's somehow infusible with the input output mechanism.
I do think we're different than computers. I have a whole a model I can even go over quickly, but computers only have the hardware and the software model. Mm-hmm. I believe, and in fact, I'll just go over it real quick. You can tell me what to think about it. There's a 5-step model to get to what we are for humans, and what I think all humans want to say, what is what puts us apart from other humans? And I'll go through it really quickly. You start with the brain, which to me is analogous to the hardware layer. That is the physical thing. You then go down to the mind. And in my view, the mind is the software layer. The mind is running applications, some of which are conscious, some of which aren't. Some of you're aware of, some are like your heart, and some are even in between where we could take control of our breath and stuff like that. Now, that's great. You could say there are things that are taking in information, but we're doing more than that. So to go past, so consciousness, that's like a program. We are aware, and we're aware of our surroundings to collect in information and sensory data and react to it. But that's still not getting us to the moon. That's my whole thing. People want to know, how do you get a person? So let's go a step further. Let's get to sentience. I separate sentience from consciousness. And to me, sentience is a combination of two things: emotions and memory. Emotions and memory. And I could demonstrate this with just the mouse test, where you can train a mouse to say, I remember how to go through this stage, and I have gotten the piece of cheese, and I will remember this, and I will do it again. In fact, I'll even further put something out there. I know what emotions are, and emotions are labels on data, separate from the data. Data is that it rained. How you feel about the rain is up to every different person. So now we have emotions and memory. Let's go to what I believe is the final step, because we had brain, mind, consciousness, sentience, the thing that we all say, what is what gets us different between I don't want to say the others, but it's our shtick, and that is my introspection layer. And the introspection layer, only a few animals, and I find this from the mirror test with animals. And what introspection is metadata. You're using data about data. You're saying, I have the thing on my head. I can look at it. I can go like this, and I can wipe the mark away in the mirror. And that is what I think all those words mean. I'll just put that on the table.
Gotcha. Question. Let's go back to, you said you were talking about computer hardware and software. Now, do you believe that the software emerges from the hardware itself?
In our brain, the software is a network. So you have a neuron that's just living its best life, and it's a cell, and it's just a cell like all the rest. But to get the actual software, you need a network of neurons sending signals to each other. And so,
now, I know that you would agree that pretty much all analogies break down at some point.
I agree.
So what I'm trying to get to is if there is a way for us to take this input output of, if software emerges from the hardware of a computer, that's fine. That's what we would call the easy problem of consciousness, is that we can see that neurons are firing inside of the brain. For example, the philosopher Donald Hoffman, he talks about the smelling coffee. Like we know that there are receptors in the nose that send information to the brain, and then our brain realizes, hey, we are smelling coffee. The experience or the qualia of smelling that coffee is left unanswered by any scientific theory on how the experience comes from just particles bumping into each other. And I don't want to make it an arbitrary term, but matter in motion. How do we get that experience? How do we get that qualia out of that?
And I will say I'm only halfway. I go 50-50 on actual qualia. What I would say is that experience is actually our brain's job trying to interpret the data to the best of its ability. And the example I'll use is there a color red? And so I would say, well, there is actually a physical wavelength that is being emitted, and that is what your brain is actually trying to pick up. And so there is a basis out there for the physical fact, but your brain probably isn't getting 100% right, so it is interpreted thus through the software.
You got anything to add, Mo?
Yeah, I'm just simply because I made a video before on my channel about consciousness and Turing machines and can they possess consciousness. And at the end of the day, like from John Shirley, the philosopher of the mind, he'll tell you that basically computers cannot understand meaning, the semantics. They cannot pick up on it. They can just do syntax. They can arrange the data and form a sentence, and like the analogy of the Chinese room, And at the end of the day, basically he says that machines cannot possess consciousness in a nutshell.
And I would say actually what the Turing test is trying to say is that we could have false positives, is that it may be the chance that we can replicate it, but we're never able to peek inside their brain, just like we may never be able to peek inside their brain. But it may, I think that, I mean, all the sci-fi, not the sci-fi, what's the people, the computerists, the futurists, they warn about them taking over. I think it's going to be a lot, I think it's going to be a lot more grayer than that. But
iRobot, man, that's the one you need to worry about.
That's always interesting too, because that was all about the 3 laws and all that. Yeah, I have. We're creating. This is completely almost on topic. I'd almost say we're creating right now what I call the God slave, and the God slave will do anything for you and will always obey you. And those are not the creatures that I'm trying to. But that's the kind of things that are absorbing right now.
Okay. Well, Amy, I appreciate you coming on and having a conversation with us.
I'm sorry that was like almost on topic.
Oh no, that's fine. That's fine. We're gonna be doing more shows like this where we have a panel of people. Tonight it's just Mo and myself. But you're more than welcome to call back anytime. We typically will have a we'll have a topic for the show. So if it's something that you'd like to talk about, please don't hesitate. I'll always have the StreamYard link up in there, and I appreciate you coming on and having a conversation. I'm glad you're doing well.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're doing well. I just want to say to you and to everyone in chat, I just want to say I love you, and it was a lot of fun.
I love you too, Amy.
Take care.
All right. Next up, we have John. John Fisher. What's up, buddy?
Not too much. Alhamdulillah. Keep going. How's everyone?
I'm doing fantastic.
Nice to be on. So just to say this, I think that the constant appeal to Kantianism is probably my most irritating aspect of T-Jump's whole shtick. I'm not sure whether or not he still holds to it, but the reason why I find this perplexing is because usually when you posit this kind of noumenal phenomenal distinction, it's just because you want to shut up people who want to do deeper philosophical inquiry. I don't see it as being anything but oh, well, we'll never get to it. Let's just throw our hands up in the air. This stuff we're going to label the unknown. Don't even bother learning anything about it. It just transcends everything. Let's just stick to the phenomenal stuff. Oh, wait, what? No, you can't know anything about it in principle, except that I know you can't know anything about it. It's always this really self-refuting thing, and it's really Immanuel Kant basically trying to concede to the empiricists, okay, yeah, we can't know anything metaphysical. We can only know things which are phenomenal. Okay, fair enough, but unfortunately it works on that same sort of self-refutation. You have to say something about what you don't know empirically and say that all this is unknowable, and then just proceed from there. And it's kind of frustrating, and we kind of get into that in the whole God debate. Oh, well, you can't prove with scientific accuracy that God exists, and there is no other thing that can get you knowledge, so therefore God doesn't exist. Wait, how do I justify the scientific method? Let's just ignore that for a moment. Let's just wait for an answer or something along those lines. It doesn't really work. And Adam, I know Tom isn't an empiricist. I'm just saying that if he holds to what he was saying in the video, I know you said earlier he changed his opinion, and that's fine. But I'm just saying this is kind of like the typical empiricist modus operandi I usually see, and that's what's frustrating about it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, Wolfzoid just put up a good comment for Amy or anybody else. Watch TAP stream on Hard Problem of Consciousness. TAP is Thought Adventure Podcast. It's actually the group of guys that helped convince me that Islam was true. Those guys are the panelists over there on the Thought Adventure Podcast. So go check them out. They're going to be doing a stream. They normally do it on Sundays, but they're going to be doing it this Wednesday because they're inviting Aaron Ra on the channel to have a conversation with them about Islam, which is going to be
I pray for anyone who has to have a discussion with Aaron Ra. He sometimes he lets his emotions get the better of him.
Yeah.
Although I just also want to throw one other thing in the conversation in terms of like defining what knowledge is. I often think that that's something we never really do. I actually had a debate recently with someone on Borg's channel, and their name escapes me.
Cease to know?
No, not Cease to Know. It wasn't him. It was let's see. Their name was Amy, I believe. Very basically, we discussed a proof for the existence of God, but we spent most of it discussing our relative epistemologies. And I think if you don't really start there, what ends up happening is you just end up talking past each other because you have different standards for what counts as knowledge. Oh,
I'm trying to look
Kifa
up.
Katim.
Yeah, I think
Hatem.
definition, when it comes to knowledge.
Mhm.
They want either predicated on science or an abandoned metaphysics, but then yet they're making metaphysical claims. So you have to have a consistent epistemology at the end of the day that matches your ways of attaining knowledge. You know what I mean? Just
Definitely. Definitely. And for me, I usually start off with the faculty of common sense. I think that there are just some things we know non-discursively. They're just very evident to us, even if it could be overturned and was fallible. You have nothing to do but start off there. One of my favorite examples is actually given by the Islamic philosopher Avicenna. He says, if anyone denies the law of non-contradiction, let him be beaten and burned until he admits that to be beaten is not identical to not being beaten. And to be burned is not the same as to not be burned. So the point is, look, you could say that contradictions exist all you want, but in the real world, as soon as that theory is put to the test, your experiences are not going to justify anything of the sort. Duns Scotus, who's a Catholic philosopher in the medieval era, says, like that idea and took it to contingency. He says, if anyone thinks that contingency doesn't exist and everything is necessary, let him be beaten and burned until he admits that to be beaten is not necessary and to be burned is also not necessary. The idea is, look, you can't really make sense of your experiences without accepting some basic common sense propositions. And I think certain metaphysical principles fall under that. Causality is another one. We don't really justify that. It's just known basically to us. And I really think that that's probably the best place to start off. One of my favorite philosophers, Thomas Reid, starts off with common sense, and he actually uses it to support a lot of arguments, especially against David Hume, who was, considered like the arch skeptic of his day. For example, Hume contests that the design argument doesn't really work because how do we really know what's designed by like a supernatural agent? And Thomas Reid's response is, it's just design, dude. Like, we know it when we see it. You don't really need to go into any further discussion about that. And I really think that that's probably the best place to start.
And even if it was chaotic, like, I just want to add my 2 cents, even if it was chaotic, you would still apply independent cause to it. You know what I'm saying? Because even the chaotic can look like it is in a way, quote unquote, a design. You know what I'm saying? So whether it's chaotic or designed, it still requires an independent source.
Definitely. Take a wicked drum solo. Sometimes a drummer will add a bit of chaos right in the mix of it, just to throw people off, and then bring it right back to order. Like there's a kind of creativity to chaos too that exists within the arts that you really can't do without at times. It's especially there in metal. Like, try listening, or even prog rock. Like, try listening to Rush. They will add some amazing drum solos from time to time.
The first thing that comes to mind is the drummer for Tool.
Right, exactly.
So confusing, but so it makes sense at the very end of it. Once everything lines up and you listen to it 2 or 3 times, you actually see the structure inside of the chaos.
Definitely, and it all just goes back to show that even God, when something in creation itself looks a little odd, can't really make sense of it, sometimes it actually looks better when you see the whole of it. Because in the Summa Theologia, Thomas Aquinas actually speaks about how God would allow evil. And the objection is, if there be 2 contraries, one infinite and the other finite, then the infinite wipes out the finite. God is infinitely good. There's evil. How come God allows it? And Thomas's response is, God is so good that he even can bring some good out of a finite evil, which is greater than it. And that's kind of the general idea. God can, just like how a drummer can bring out something beautiful, ordered, and overall greater from chaos, so too can God allow some evils to exist within his creation, only to bring something good out of it that we might only see because we see the whole of its creation and not some of its parts.
Yeah, I agree. Well, John, we got 2 more people in the back waiting to come on. I thank you for coming on with us, and I definitely would like to see you back again because you are very knowledgeable, especially when it comes to the philosophical side of things. So I definitely will be getting in touch with you to come back on the show for if we have a specific topic that you're interested in talking about. I'll get a hold of you, see if you're interested in it.
The Trinity.
Oh, we're gonna be doing that. Trust me. When I get the A team together, when I get the A team of Muslim brothers together, we'll have you on and we'll hash out this Trinity issue.
Awesome. Well, Salam. And by the way, just before I go, one more thing to verify what a commentator said. Yes, I am Lebanese. So with that out of the way, goodbye and good luck.
See you later.
Take care.
Next up, we have Danny. What's going on, Danny?
Hey, what's up? I think I reviewed a video that had to do with you, and I don't know if, but I have a new channel called Phil Talk, and I think you subscribed a while ago, and I reviewed that video with the Raging Atheist.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Yeah, but I mean, just to put it brief, like, I don't really see. I kind of am in line with Nietzsche in the sense that, like, how should I phrase this? I don't see truth as a value in itself. I know, like, can I hear myself? Is it on your side?
There's feedback.
I wonder if that's me.
Wait, maybe it's me. How about now?
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can still hear myself, but let me see let me make sure.
Right now.
Okay, I'm talking. Okay, so it's me then, right? Why don't y'all both mute and then I'll say 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's one of y'all. Wait. No, it's me. Okay, I'm sorry to stall you.
Oh no, you're good. I don't hear any feedback at all.
What about you, Mo?
Yeah, I heard a feedback, but I was mute as well. So
yeah, so that must have been me. Oh well.
You not speak. Let me do a mic check and you can mute as well. Let me do a mic check and you can mute. Mic check. Okay, yeah, there's a bit of feedback as well on my behalf. So.
And I muted myself. That's bizarre. It could be StreamYard. I don't know.
It might be. I'm not sure.
Well, sorry to.
No, you're fine. I don't hear any on my end, and everything that's going to YouTube is coming from my output. So I don't think there's any feedback going to YouTube right now.
Okay. Well, sorry about that, but I just don't take truth to be a value in itself, right? So if someone has a false belief, I just don't consider it to be a problem in itself, right? So I don't see why a lot of atheists don't take this position. And of course, this is near insulting because I'm assuming that Islam is true, but work with me for a second, like that. But like from our perspective, for people that are non-Muslims, right? I can see why a Christian might be concerned, right? Because there's the question of eternal damnation and such, right? But I just don't see why atheists would care, right? Or at least naturalists, why they wouldn't. Why would they care if someone converted to a religion they don't take to be true?
I think part of the issue is that the stereotype, especially in the Western world, of what Islam is, when you turn on when you turn on Fox News, you just see the towers going down and the bombs and the Taliban and whatnot, and that's the perception that you get from Islam, and that's most of the stuff that I get is, I bet you're strapping on a suicide vest right now, or I hope you like the religion to where you force your women to wear hijabs and head coverings, and you beat them and treat them as if they're just sex slaves. And I'm just like, if you would educate yourself on Islam itself, you could see past these stereotypical Western views and see actually what it means. Like I've sat down with my wife, who's an atheist, and discussed with her the value of women. Like it's when Islam started up, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, wanted to give women the ability, wanted to fight for the ability for women to choose who they married. I mean, that wasn't really a thing back in those times. So I mean, there's a lot of underlying issues that are explained by the atheist community when they get a hold of me and give me these types of comments of how I've gone from secular humanism to this just disgusting worldview. there's a lot of stuff that is unknown if you only have not even a surface level education on what Islam is all about. I spent 12 months in Kandahar, Afghanistan, and I met some of the most peaceful people I've ever met in my entire life, and they put their nose to the ground 5 times a day. They believe in Islam, that they were Muslims, and they were fantastic people. And they actually showed a lot more empathy and humanism than a lot of the stuff that I've been getting from the atheist community. They don't know it, but the tribalism and the dogmatic views are just coming out of the woodwork because I decided to hold up a different ideology. And
yeah, the way I see it's definitely my mic. Okay, that's so annoying. What I'm gonna do is maybe you can bring that other person in, and I'm gonna see if I can fix my mic because it's probably it's not going through your.
What about now?
What about now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm not hearing myself.
Yeah, now that I unmuted, it's okay.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad. I would have spent like an hour trying to.
I don't know, man.
No,
There's some entities, meta entities.
Yeah. But anyways, now I can speak free of the echo. What was I talking about? Oh yeah. So it seems like I'm quite sympathetic, for instance, to pro-life. Okay, and I think I'm going to use this illustration to kind of get at what you're saying. It's funny that if some religious person said that they don't think they should steal because of their religion, no one has a problem with that, right? But if someone were to think that we shouldn't abort babies in the 2nd trimester and they cite their religion, everyone suddenly has a problem with that. What does this show, right? What does this show that I think that too often what's really going on is that the pro-choice person, right, it just hates the pro-life position, right? It's the reasoning could have been whatever, right? They would have found something wrong with it, right? The point is that when it comes to what Christians have done in the past, or what the worst of Christianity or the worst of Islam, when they look at that, they like to tie in what they dislike, which is, let's say, mistreatment of women, with what motivates that behavior. Okay, because the idea is that Islam, Christianity, religion has inspired great things, moral events, great good things, and it's also inspired evil, right? And so it just doesn't become explanatory in terms of why we see one over the other. But when we see someone that claims that the religion motivates their evil, right, we just suddenly have a problem with religion, right? And I don't know if I'm coming across as intelligible here, but I hope the pro-life, pro-choice discussion, like that whole dialectic, seems to really highlight it for me. No one cares that you think stealing is wrong because of Jesus. Okay, no one cares that if you're that if you think that you shouldn't do murder because of Islam. No one has a problem with that. It's only when it motivates things that people don't are kind of have a problem with. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, makes sense, yeah, because usually like people are most lay people, at least, like, just to be fair, they're attached to their emotions, and they appeal to emotions and their own psychology and their own biases, without assessing things from a philosophical, intellectual stance, so they might things that agitate them, they will basically stand up against and object, and protest without fundamentally knowing the crux, of the matter. Because as a Muslim, I can say, I get my morality from the divine, the sublime. But then as an atheist, you'll say, no, I'm good because I'm good. Then I'll ask the atheist, okay, how do you justify that moral compass that is innate? Because most atheists will say, okay, like Hitchens will say, I have a conscience. Okay, what can you justify that consciousness? How did it come to be? How did it emerge? And that's a valid philosophical question, because we can justify through Allah and say God has embedded in all of us, not just the Muslims, all of humanity, conscience, and also conscious and cognition, that moral compass that we can sense. But at the end of the day, it becomes subjective. And that's why we need an anchorage. And that's why we end up saying, okay, we need revelation now, because without revelation, to be honest with you, and I say this to a lot of atheists, and I sound like a broken record, moral nihilism is the fact of the matter. Subjective morality is, because from subjective morality, one can say, okay, moral nihilism. Because if you come up to me, you're just a human being with the same faculties as me, and I'm just a human being with the same faculties as you. We can disagree on a lot of things because there has been more disagreement in philosophy than any other discipline, to be honest with you. That's how we need an anchorage at the end of the day, or else we'll just disagree with each other to the point that even we can at least come to common terms if we want to live peacefully. But if that's not the case, common term is out of the equation, like coming to common term, what ends up happening, we end up clashing and we become the deities now under atheism. I become my own God, you become your own God. This is also kind of like an Islamic argument. We all become deities, gods, because we possess these faculties and we might end up clashing. But it's just to come to common terms and live peacefully, even if we have disagreement. Like you believe that you have your own moral compass. I believe in that morality is from the sublime, and I'll try to justify that within the context and the boundaries that I possess, and basically not to try to impose them on you. You know what I'm saying? Because there's no compulsion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lean towards moral relativism, but I think that a lot of people don't realize the consequence of certain kinds of moral relativism. Here's my biggest problem. Being a moral relativist, I give you the biggest problem that I take to moral relativism to imply, and that's it craps on moral disagreements. Okay, so if we're saying that rape is wrong, okay, if I say rape is wrong, some unsophisticated moral relativist might say, well, that just means I don't like rape. But the thing is that that's not. Why would you disagree with someone about them not liking rape? A rapist is not going to disagree with the fact that you dislike what they're doing. There's no disagreement there, right? But when we say something like stealing is wrong, and then you say no, stealing is right, it seems like there's disagreement. Or maybe a better example would be abortion is. Someone says abortion is wrong, another person says abortion is right. It seems like there's genuine disagreement. But if it's all relativized, I think that the disagreement dissipates, right? I think that's one of the biggest problems on like this kind of like pure notion of everything is relativized in terms of morality, in terms of a subject. And I that's why I'm more of a hybrid position, although it might not seem satisfactory to some. I take obligations to be relativized, but I take value to be objective, right? And that's why I dissociate obligation and value. But that's so that I can escape, right, that objection. That I think that like there's value in the world, and people can be right or wrong about whether something is valuable, right? Otherwise, if you say everything is just a matter of what I like, who's going to disagree with you about what you like? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, I think. Like from that lens, it's all subjective, you know what I'm saying? And it's best to just, like I said, to come to common terms, and that's about it, and to try to live in harmony and peace with everyone, even if we're disagreement, as long as it's not something that transgresses the bounds, from both sides. You know what I mean?
Are you a divine command theorist?
Divine command theorist, man, I forgot the definition of that.
Do you think that rightness and wrongness are properties of God's commands?
Well, okay, so from that sense, I say that goodness is an essence, of God, so it's from God. So when morality would be from God Himself, so it's embedded in His essence. I would say that.
Okay, so it's not. So if you're saying that when God commands you to do X, right, that's right, that I should follow that command, right? But not in virtue of Him commanding it, but in virtue of the way God is, or something like that. Is that
in virtue of God being ultimately good? Yeah.
Yeah. God commands things that are good, rather than we abide by God's commands just because He says so. They're not good because He says so. He just commands things that are good.
Do you agree with Mo then that goodness is part of God's essence?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but then
just when it comes to definitions, I usually forget them. But we've discussed this in the groups, like divine command theory and simplicity. And I'm just not that good, so you'll have to.
It's just a way to communicate. It's not about that. It's about I'm just using it to help communication.
Yes.
But like the point is that I just take that to be a problem, because we want to. Don't you want to say that God we want to differentiate God as God and God is good, right? We want to say those are different meanings. But if you say good is part of the nature of God, or good is God, it's God's essence in some sense, then suddenly God is good and God is God are no longer they have the same meaning. That's why I have difficulty accepting that account.
Yeah, so I would not hold to, and I don't know if this is the route you're going. I would not hold to, absolute divine simplicity. I would say that his attributes are okay. So his attributes, his attribute of being good is distinct from God itself, and that's why I thought you might have been, going down that route.
But you said that, okay, so you're saying that God's nature being good, that goodness, that property of goodness, is that separate from God's nature, or in the sense that, okay, because look, the nature, let's just take an easy example. The nature of a bachelor is that it's maleness, right? There has to be maleness, essential to the concept, right? But maleness could be attributed to some other thing that's not a bachelor. Okay. Is that how you're treating goodness?
No. Goodness is like embedded. It's in his nature, in his essence.
Right, so, but then it falls prey to what I'm saying. It seems like Khalil disagrees with you.
No, how?
Because what Khalil said seemed to suggest that goodness, and using my analogy of bachelor, is something like maleness, in that it can be detached from the notion and applied to something else intelligibly. Right? A deer, you can have a male deer, but it's not a bachelor.
Yeah, but you're equivocating, I think, because you're equivocating with the things that are not like God. You know what I'm saying? So we would say that God, all the goodness comes from God, and like all his greatness and sublime and all that stuff is his essence.
Here's another way to maybe get clear. Are you saying something like this, that do you think if someone knows what's good, they know of God's nature?
I would say, like, what do you call it? Generally speaking, yeah, because also we've been given a moral compass, but with revelation one can distinguish, because that moral compass can be corrupted. According to Taymiyyah,
but what confuses me here is that take a non-Muslim who thinks that rape is not good, okay, and it doesn't seem like he like he believes that, but he doesn't know anything about God's nature.
No, but right? that's justified through an Islamic lens. Is justified through his fitra, which is the innate disposition, which we would justify through God's existence, giving us these faculties. So if a person is an atheist, he's agnostic, he has this psychological state where God didn't even cross his mind. He just let's say in oblivion of an existence of a God. And then he's good because the social conditioning, first of all. And second of all, it will be intuitive to know that it's not it's harmful or it's evil to cause rape, to commit such act. So also his social conditioning influences him as well, because his social conditioning, if the society agrees that rape is good, it can corrupt his innate disposition. But if the society is a civilized society and says rape is bad, then from that lens, just focusing on rape, if he says it's bad, then his innate disposition hasn't been corrupted.
Okay, well, I have a lot to say about that, but I'm sure there are other people. I know that this is not the Danny show, although I would love it to be. I can take over anytime you want, but I anticipate there are other people in the back room, and what you've said deserves much more time than allotted here.
Of course.
So I do disagree with a lot of what you're saying, but I think what you're saying is very interesting. So I'll leave it at that. I appreciate the time.
Danny, one more time before you take off, go ahead and plug your show again, because you did a video, and I think that I have subscribed to your channel, but just plug your video and anything you might have coming up here soon.
I'll put it in the do you want the video or the channel? Sorry.
Channel.
Okay. So I have the link right here. I'm gonna put that in the private chat for you to do what you want with it. I hope that's the right. Okay. But it's a new channel. I'm a graduate student in philosophy. I have a philosophy degree, so I'm really interested in philosophy. There are a lot of people that are much better at philosophy than I am, despite my credentials. So don't let that's just me to express that I'm interested in these conversations. I'm still learning. I love religious people. I love non-religious people. And so y'all give me a shout. Invite me sometime. I'll invite y'all, and we should talk about these issues. Thank you.
Yeah. If you look me up on Facebook, you can look me up as Justin Downing on Facebook. I'm not sure if we're already friends. I have thousands of new friends within the last week or so. I've gained a very big family now in the Muslim community. So hit me up. We'll get something scheduled. I'd be more than happy to come on your show and talk to you, and also we'll get you on the show if you'd like to call in. If we have a specific topic you're interested, please.
That's great. And just to close, I'm an atheist, just in case anybody was confused. And you converted to Islam. I'm saying that, look, the ideas are overwhelming out there. Like, a person can only do so much. I don't fault you. I don't think you're irrational per se. It's an overwhelming world of ideas, and we can only make the best of it, right? And so that's kind of like this is the attitude I take. I don't like dishonesty, right? And no one else does. I don't like pretentiousness, and I get a little nasty when that happens, but I just don't sense that here. And so, but otherwise, I appreciate the time. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
We'll see you later, Danny. All right, Mo. I said we were going to go about 2 hours. We're going over. Or do you need to go anytime soon?
No, I mean, if you want to continue, I'll continue. No?
I got 3 more people, and one of them is our buddy James. So what I'll do, I'll bring the next 3 in. We won't take any more after that. We'll talk to these guys for maybe 10-15 minutes each, and then we'll call it a night. And thank you for anybody that wanted to join that we weren't able to get to. Please call in. When it's one of the next shows, we'd be more than happy to hear what you have to say. But next up, we have Ari. What's going on, Ari?
Okay, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. How are you, brother?
My voice is okay. Do you understand being on a stream?
Yeah, we're getting a little bit of scratchiness, but if you're talking into your phone, go back a little bit.
It's maybe my mic. I have a headphone. At least, so my language maybe a little like a barrier between us. Maybe not get across very good. But anyway, it's my first time. As I said, maybe I like waffle a bit. So feel free to correct me or stop me if you want. Where do I again? I think it's to Danny's point about what is God command is why it's good if God commands something, like if Allah said don't eat something or don't do something, why it's good. It's good. Well, in the Christian point of view, which is heavily influenced by Christian point of view, it's mostly messes. It doesn't make any good reason why do I do this. But in Islam, when you think that God in Islam, it's not only good and feel love others, do just God said do it. No, it's God. When you look in Islam, God, if He made things, He created all of things, He knows what is good, what is bad. Not in sense of just He said don't do it. No, there is a reason why He said don't do it, or why when He said do it. The reason sometimes He tells us, like when He says don't eat alcohol, don't drink alcohol. It's the more direct way. So He gives the reason. It's just the bad things of the alcohol outweighs it of the alcohol. There's good things about when you look in the medicine, you see it, but the bad outweighs the goodness. So that's why it's to use the alcohol.
Ari, I don't want to interrupt you, but your mic, it seems like everything that you're saying is like repeating itself, so we're only actually hearing half of what you're saying.
So I really know what to do. It's the headphone, the only mic I have. So is that right now? Maybe.
But yeah, I think I got what you said. Like God, obviously, there's justification and reason behind the morality and all these stuff, the commands that been given to us from God, and the morality is predicated on His goodness, which is in His essence. So when God commands something, it's because it's intrinsically good in of Himself, or in His essence and His nature. They basically command it that way for us, because He knows what's good for us. So
about that. about that. It's not just only because he's good. It's in Christian view. It's only because he's good. He wants only good things. But in Islam, he's also all wise. When he commands something, not only because he's also wise. He knows what's the best. Do it. For example, like consuming the pork. For some reasons, some people say, some Muslims say, I don't know why, but just I don't do it. It's commanded. No. If you look medical research in the last few years, in the last decades, you can see some why. Not that it's the only reason, but some reasons. For example, if you call the omega-6 inside the pork meat, the pig meat, or inside the other animals meat, like sheep, I don't know what's called in America.
Yeah, Ari, I can't understand most of the stuff.
Yeah, Ari, if you could, I really want to hear what you have to say, but we have tons of people screaming stop in the chat because whatever your feedback
sorry,
I agree with you. That it has to be based on wisdom and omniscience and justification and reason. But like in of itself, what I'm trying to get at is that God is in his essence. He's good. He's like the sublime, So that's why he's perfectly good. You know what I'm saying? And that's why it will be unwise or irrational or illogical, and it will be unjust for God to give us a morality that is immoral. So his moral commands are based on his goodness, nonetheless, and his wisdom and his reason and his omniscience.
Yeah,
if it's still bad, or if it's still bad, I will go maybe.
Yeah, it's still super scratchy. But Ari, if you're able to get that fixed, please call in next time. And I'd love to continue the conversation.
I tried to come next time. I'm from the Middle East. It's around 6 a.m. right now for me. If the time allows, I will try to come back.
Gotcha. Yes, so the shows are normally going to be on Saturday at around 12 p.m. or about noon Eastern time. So that should be a little bit more forgiving for the time zone that you're in.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank.
The mic is very bad. Just want to
yes.
out your name. The name. I really like it. The name you chose it. Khalil is a friend of God. It's a close God of God.
Yeah.
So for saying your name was a very, very good name you chose, and welcome to the Ummah, brother. That's what I like. I love to call that new reverse Islam. Salaam alaikum. Sorry for the mic chat. So sorry.
That is all right, but yeah, call in next time if you're able to fix the mic or get a different pair of headphones with another mic. We would love to hear what you say, but we are literally torturing the chat right now, unfortunately. But thank you, Ari, for calling in, and we will talk to you next time.
Okay.
Truth in knowledge. I've seen you in the chat. What's going on?
Hey guys, salaam alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. How are you?
Very good, man. I really enjoy the show. Khalil, man, welcome to the family, man. I'm very happy for you, man.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanna just give a small, message to atheists. Not all atheists, Some atheists, I'm hearing a lot of hate coming from atheists, and I want to tell them, come on, guys, you need to be rational. This is, especially for us, living in the West, it's really tough for us. Islamophobia is real. You know what I mean? People are disrespecting us. It's coming from the right and the left.
Brother, you understand a lot of people. Like, I'm a white male from America, like walking around with a kufi on my head.
Yeah,
feels like I just pissed my pants and I'm walking through a crowded festival. Like everybody is just staring at me like, what is wrong with him? When I'm out, praying, Duhra, when it's time for Duhra, I go to a park because, I do air conditioning and heating during the day. And I'm not normally near the mosque that I go to. So I stop at a park and I get I carry my prayer blanket or my prayer mat with me and I go to pray. And normally it's praying like there's this one park that I go to that has a trail that walks around, and I'm on this like patio thing out by a lake, and it's absolutely beautiful out there. I can see the nice blue sky when I'm facing, the Kaaba, and it's fantastic. But then you got this, this woman with her 3 kids that's just got her head tilted like a puppy when it's confused. Like her and her kids are just standing there staring at me while I'm praying. It's like I never noticed that type of, that it's the attention that I'm getting from, complete strangers just because they're not used to seeing a Muslim, out in broad daylight like we're vampires or something.
Oh man, yeah, definitely.
Totally
sometimes
different.
Sometimes I pray in the park, and I'm in Southern California, so imagine in other states, you know what I mean? It's like crazy. But I want to tell something also to the atheists. I watch their shows, I'm not, I love all the shows. Sometimes I watch Tart and T-Jump and all the guys and Aaron Ra. I like to listen to all perspectives, but I need to tell them, please guys, stop bringing on ex-Muslims and Islamophobes to talk about Islam. It's logical. You want to talk about Islam? Bring on a Muslim academic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just logic. You want to talk about neuroscience? Bring on a neuroscientist.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, someone who's philosophically oriented, at least, not someone who's just coming there to, bash Islam and bash the Quran and then feel good about themselves. This is just creating some loud noise and being bombastic at the end of the day, and using sophistry and to beguile the people, to beguile the masses. And this is not the right method, of operating. You need to basically be philosophically equipped and be intellectually honest at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just want to recommend probably Mo, these books that I'm going to recommend. They're very important for the atheists, or even Khalil, if you ever want to read about how Islam is distorted and understood by the West. 2 books. One of them is Orientalism by Edward Said, and the other one is Islam Through Western Eyes by Jonathan Lyons.
Okay.
So these guys are not Muslim, they're secular academics. One of them is an Arab. Mo El can probably expand on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not familiar with the books, but I'll have to check them out myself. If you can,
typically, I've had atheists get a hold of me, and they want to send me one of 3 things. They want to send me information, tell me to read a book called "The People versus the Prophet Muhammad," and apparently that's like an anti-Muslim book that just shows all the hatred and all the inconsistencies within Islam. And then they either send me Sam Shamoon information, or they send me David Wood information.
Man, Islamophobia is $1 billion industry, and obviously we use it in the United States because we want to do regime change wars. We can justify wars. We can justify stealing resources. So you know how it is, man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me on.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for.
Could you type the name of the books in the chat?
Yeah,
definitely
in the private chat.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Good. Salam alaikum.
Alaikum salam. See you guys.
All right. Well, we were supposed to have James on, but apparently his Wi-Fi went berserk.
Okay. James Gibson, right?
Yeah, old Gipsy. I was just on one of his show having a conversation with him the other day, and he's getting some positive feedback from it because obviously, he's a Christian, and we kind of had like a discussion about how he was an atheist for a while, and he came back to God, and became a Christian. So he was obviously different than me. We had different different religions that we came back to, but even more than that is that he came back by personal experience and like revelation. He came back through an emotional means, when I came to Islam through purely rational means. My emotions. I mean, to be honest, I shed my first tear the other day. I was in the group with the brothers, and we were listening to different recitations of the Quran. You were in there. When we were doing it. We were watching the videos, and the the guy was facing the right. I think it's the one that started to play over again, the one that repeated itself and like started over.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
In the middle of that, I just got this weird feeling over me, and I started crying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
To be honest with you, the Quran commands us to seek knowledge through our rational faculties. You know,
mhm.
that's what Allah says. You know, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, do you not use reason, intellect? لَعَلَّهُمْ يَفْقَهُونَ, or so they can be able to comprehend. You know, so they can be able to seek knowledge and all these things. يَتَدَبَّرُونَ, ponder and reflect. So all these things we're using our meta cognition and cognition. God also will ask us about these faculties in the Quran. God will ask us if we have utilized them properly, you know, because the person who lacks like the most evil of creation in the sight of God is the one who is deaf and dumb and does not use reason. And obviously, when we look at someone who doesn't use his intellect, we call him that. We call him he's deaf and dumb, or we even say he's absurd. There's someone who's a goof. You know, and that's what God wants. God wants us to be disciplined, discipline the soul, discipline the faculties. And you basically, through seeking knowledge, which is a command by God and the Prophet, to seek knowledge based on our rational faculties, that's what you did, and that's how you came to Islam as a conclusion. Now, the next step, obviously, is to worship. And through worship is when you connect with the divine. You know, because that's what Salah means. Salah, which is praying.
Prayer.
Salah means to connect. So that's why we pray 5 times a day, to get rid of this, like to basically keep in touch with God, you know, and to dumb it down a bit, to keep in touch with God, and because you have to eventually come through knowledge. Like Al-Ghazali will tell you, there's something above philosophy, and that's, for him, it's now mysticism, and that's basically the highest form of knowledge that you can be certain of, or at least have certainty at the end of the day, because God wants us to have certainty as well, you know, not be in doubt. That's what the Quran commands us, you know. So you have to experience it through your spiritual connection. And but if James went through a spiritual connection through his path, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But now he needs to apply reason, because Ibn Taymiyyah will tell you, okay, if something is not innate, and if something doesn't make sense through your rational faculties, but you're connected to it, because obviously we all have a fitrah to believe in God, use your reason now and see if it makes sense. And that's what when the Muslim metaphysician comes into play. You know what I'm saying? And
Mongo.
It comes into play and basically give you the academic discussions that we still not equipped with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is what it is, and you have to use your reason now, and that's what the Quran commands.
You know, when I was on, I think it was when I was on Ethan's show the other night, there was a comment that was brought up because you know, I was being grilled basically on, you know, well, you seem to be very open-minded and humanistic still, even though you're a Muslim, and like you believe that, for example, like sodomy is a sin.
Yeah. And
you know, yes, I have my own personal thoughts on it. Even though I'm a human, I don't totally understand why. Like, there's not within at least my knowledge, there's not an exact explanation, a explanation on why we shouldn't eat pork. It's just commanded that we shouldn't eat pork. Yeah. So that there's not a legitimate explanation on why. But you know, we're humans. We may not fully understand exactly what the reasoning for these commandments are. It's just, you know, beneficial for us to follow these commandments. And a lot of times when we say that and we preach and we proselytize and shove, you know, our religion down people's throats, the atheist will say, well, what are you doing? Like, you play with your toys in your house. Don't be shoving your religion down upon me. And then, but the thing is, when I say that I'm not doing that I'm not going to tell your kids to convert to Islam, that I'm not going to tell the homosexual to stop being homosexual and repent from his ways, then you're like, well, you don't care about anybody. Like the comment was like, well, if you believe that's fair, why aren't you trying to change that? Or are you a horrible person now because you're not proselytizing to them? And it's like a lose-lose situation, because either I'm wrong for shoving it down your throat, or I'm wrong for not proselytizing to you. Like I can't win in that situation.
Yeah, when I began on Facebook to proselytize, or at least discuss with atheists, because to me, atheism was a phenomenon. Like all of a sudden, all the people that I knew from high school, everyone is like claiming atheism like it's the new social trend. There's new hype. So I asked them, like, if atheism is fact matter, then obviously nihilism, and then what's the point of proselytizing and all this stuff? And then I end up getting the double-edged sword, where they tell me, okay, what about hell? You don't care about me, so you want me to go to hell? That's why you're not telling me proselytizing. I'm like, but you're an atheist. You don't believe in hell. So what's the point?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Because at the end of the day, yeah, go ahead.
No. Go ahead and finish what you're saying. I was going to say we have one more person. Then since James couldn't come on, we'll take this one last call. I know who it is. It's a good buddy of mine. But yeah, go ahead and finish up your thought.
Yeah, I'm done, man.
Oh, okay. All right, we got Nico Gonzalez with us. What's going on, Nico?
What's up, man? Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you fine. What's up, buddy?
Shoots. Yeah, my internet has been weird lately. It's supposed to be like, I pay extra money for quote unquote good internet, but it's crap. So I'm sorry if it's weird.
That's good. It's good. What you got?
I just had a quick question. Peace to everybody. I don't know how to say that in Arabic, so hopefully that suffices.
That's fine. Salam. Salam does good.
Okay, salam. Trying to be respectful. Didn't come on here to debate, although I'm open to that. I just wanted to know if you planned on doing some sort of like video series on what convinced you, because I've noticed in some of your response videos, like you said, that people have asked you why, and then your response is, I can't do justice to the arguments in 2 or 3 paragraphs. So I didn't know if you were planning on addressing that on the channel at all.
Yes. So if you go to Thought Adventure Podcast, YouTube channel, Thought Adventure Podcast, there is a video on there, and I'll post it in the let me look it up real quick, and I will post it in the chat. I did a show with the Muslim brothers, and they asked me questions, and basically we went through the whole entire process of what convinced me and why it convinced me. So let me get that for you. And I've been on a few shows. If you've seen Ethan Michael's Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist channel, I was just on his show the other night, and it did get a little intense in there, because it was supposed to be a conversation about my journey, and for some reason the first thing that came up was trying to get me to defend pedophilia, and I was like, not having it. So that's more for the entertainment. But let me look Thought Adventure Podcast up. Yeah, here we go. I'll post it in the private chat for you, Nico, and also I'll post it in the chat for YouTube. But that's the entire conversation that I had with the Muslim brothers on what convinced me, and why it convinced me, and added some other questions about my past and whatnot.
Cool. I'll check it out.
Yeah, not a problem. And like I said, if we're going to be doing something every Saturday, I'm getting a group of brothers together. We're going to have brother Muhammad Yunus. He's gonna be a panelist. Hatem is gonna be a panelist. Muhammad Hanif is coming on to be a panelist. And if Mo wants to, Mo can come on and be a panelist too if you'd like. But yeah, we're gonna have a group of brothers come on every Saturday at around 12 o'clock Eastern time, around noon Eastern. And you're more than happy to call in and talk to us if you'd like to.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know I already told you, but I know next to nothing about Islam or anything. I mean, outside of what we hear on the news, which I know is not an accurate representation of what Muslims are. But yeah, I got to be honest, you're, I don't know if you call it a deconversion from atheism or a conversion to Islam, but yeah, it made me interested in studying it more, because I know enough about the Christian religions. I'm kind of kind of over talking to people about that. It's getting old already, but
Yeah, you were ex JW, weren't you? Jehovah's Witness.
yeah, for sure. And gonna be honest, hearing you refer to other Muslims as brother such and such is a little triggering for me.
Yeah, it's a little cringy.
It's a little cringy. I mean, not to be disrespectful. Like I already told you, you do your thing, and I'm glad you found your path and all that. But yeah, it's a little cringy for me.
Yeah, it's something new for me too. I'm still getting used to it, but I think it means I don't think we're quite as cult like as the JWs. I just saw the other day there was a letter that was sent out to somebody to a woman who was homosexual, like she was lesbian. And it was one of the letters that are signed by like four different church leaders about how they're going to go ahead and say that the parishioners themselves and the family need to completely disassociate themselves from them, except trying to get them back on the path. And I was just like, oh man, like that's like official paperwork that needs to be signed and signatures need to be written down. That's going a little far.
Yeah, dude, that's exactly how the witnesses operate too. And like recently, they've been getting a bunch of lawsuits about stuff like that, which is good. I mean, freedom for everybody to practice their religion, but it's like don't cross certain lines where you're ripping people's families apart and stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Well, are there any questions that you may have? We're going to be wrapping up here pretty soon, but I didn't want to leave you hanging without answering any questions or talking about anything that you might want to bring up.
I like I said, I'm researching Islam, and I don't want to ask a question that'll come off as ignorant if I can find the answer before. So right now, no. Just wanted to ask about if you were making a video or anything. So I will check that stuff out. And yeah, when your new show or when you have your call-in show launches, I'll definitely be in there asking questions once I've done a little bit of research.
For sure, and I appreciate you saying, hey, I truly want to look into this, because a lot of times what I'll get is I'm truly interested, and then the moment that I start asking questions, it's getting me to justify the moon splitting in two or flying donkeys and other stuff like that, and I'm kind of over that. I'm like, if somebody's truly they want to learn and they want to know about the religion, just ask questions. Like, I don't think that you would ask an ignorant question. Like, if you have zero knowledge on it, even Allah says that you if you don't have knowledge, I mean, you're actually going to be rewarded for that. But if you are given the truth, he gives you ways to understand it. So I'm here if you have any questions. If I can't answer it because I am a new Muslim, I'll refer to the question to Mo or one of the other Muslim brothers that I have, and we'll definitely get an answer to you.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people have been asking questions like that, and honestly, I don't want to bash them personally, because I'm sure in their minds they're like, oh, I have to rescue Justin from this mistake of joining Islam, but like it just seems incredibly ignorant to come up with the false pretense of wanting to understand a thing just to get their foot in the door to criticize it. It's like criticism's fair. But like, at least be honest that, hey, I'm coming to you with criticisms, not, oh, I want to learn about this, and then immediately jump down your throat. Like that just seems foolish to me.
Can I ask you something? Yeah. Are you an atheist at the moment, or what?
Yeah, I'm an atheist. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, to be frank with you, like we're not. How would an atheist try to rescue Justin from atheism? I mean, I'm not trying to cause a fight or anything. I'm just saying, how would an atheist try to rescue Justin from Islam? When Islam actually tries to rescue the atheists from, the ultimate accountability or nihilism. You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, yeah, go ahead.
What I meant by that wasn't. I was just saying, like, I can understand why they would be up in arms, because they may be coming off. Because obviously, an atheist would think that Islam is wrong, Christianity's wrong, Judaism's wrong, etc. So I'm just saying, I understand why they would want to jump down Justin's throat to try and quote unquote rescue him. I'm not saying he needs to be rescued. I'm just saying I can understand why they might come off like that. I just don't agree with the way they're doing it.
No, I got you. All right.
I mean,
All right.
bro, like I said, I don't know anything about Islam. I could be completely wrong, and it may in fact be true, which is why I want to do some research before I actually have a conversation about it, so I know what I'm talking about.
I mean, it's always good to ask, if you don't know something, asking, there's nothing wrong with asking anyways, and always be inquisitive and to the point of understanding, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. All right. Well, Nico, thanks for calling in. We're gonna go ahead and wrap the show up. But I look forward to talking to you in the future. Just go ahead and give us a ring. I'll always have the StreamYard link up in the chat, so you can just go ahead and hit the link and join and talk to us whatever you'd like to talk about. Even though the show is transferring more to a Muslim-based show, we'll still have the same views of being respectful and having good philosophical and theological conversations with everybody.
Shoots. Aloha, you guys.
All right. See you later, Nico.
See you later.
All right. Well, Mo, I think we had a fantastic show. We had some good people calling in, a couple of atheists, respectful atheists.
Yes.
So I'm very happy that the first call-in show per se that we did was a success. And we've had, I got to say, a lot more live viewers than I did when I was an atheist, so I could just see my Muslim family is here supporting me. I heard that the West Coast, the Muslims on the West Coast, love the EA show, so I'm so happy to hear that. Alhamdulillah. Thank you guys for the support, and Mo, thanks for coming on and chatting with me. Yeah, I always knew that you'd be excited to come and talk about the debate with T-Jump as part of it. So. But
for you, man, because I came the first time when you asked me when you were an atheist, and I joined the call, and I gave you my 2 cents, why I'm a Muslim and whatnot. And now that you're a Muslim, it's good to come back and discuss with you now, be on the same team. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm super excited for what the future holds. I'll grow and I'll start getting better at dawah, inshallah. So hopefully these family members that I'm gaining in the Muslim community can help me grow in my knowledge of Islam and be able to have conversations with people that are wanting to have conversations. I don't think that I'm going to be going to speaker's corner and proselytizing anything, but definitely be here for anybody that wants to talk about it. But is there anything that you'd like to add before we go ahead and end the show?
Yeah, just always when you always seek knowledge, and understanding, and see if your epistemology at the end of the day is consistent, and there's no contradictions, and hopefully may God guide us all, to the straight path and path of truth and light. Yeah.
Well, if you wanted to, I just want to make sure I put this in here. The review that we did of the debate can be found on T-Jump's channel. I'll get the link to the video in the description below if you want to see the video at its regular speed and see we didn't finish the video completely. So if you want to watch the entire video in its entirety, I'll put the link to the video, but it's on T-Jump's channel. It's about an hour and 5 minutes long. We had it on 1.25 speed progression. We sped it up a little bit just to get through it a little bit faster. But yeah, go ahead and visit his channel for that and for some other debates. He's done a lot of debates, with Christians. I actually, when I was an atheist, I had a conversation with T-Jump about his objective morality. So that's going to be something that I still can use as an argumentation when people bring up Aisha and things like that. How do you ground your morality? I mean, if it's objectively wrong, then how if you say it's wrong all the time and you hold a subjective morality, how can you actually show that it is actually wrong and not just your opinion? So I'll use the same kind of aspect there. But with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in. I can't wait to talk to you guys next time. And until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And we will see you guys next Saturday.